I dated Sarah for 2 years, 2 wonderful years. We were each other's only friends all through high school, and I finally got up the courage to ask her out after we graduated. She was a shy girl who spent most of her life being teased by the so-called popular kids. As a child, she was bullied because of her red hair or being overweight. Then puberty hit her so hard that she had to buy new bras almost every week. People said terrible things about her, implying that her large breasts meant she was a prostitute or that she had already been with 100 guys. I knew that she was actually a pure girl, a pure tortured soul just like me. We didn't need anyone else to get us through high school, and we wouldn't need anyone else to get us through the rest of our lives. Sarah enrolled in nursing at university, as a good soul should, while I focused on finding a job. I knew that if I found a well-paid job, we could start our life together, just the two of us. The beginning of our new relationship was difficult. Our hours in the day did not coincide while she was studying, and I grabbed any job I could find. We made time for each other through late-night calls and occasional dinners out. It was hard to be away from each other for so long, but it only strengthened our love. Now I finally had a job that could support both of us. We moved out from our parents and moved into an apartment. It was close to the university, which was ideal for Sarah as neither of us could drive a car yet. And even though I had to take 3 buses to get to work, I was happy simply because we lived together. The long hours of work and her studies still took up a lot of time, but now we spent every night together. I was both excited and nervous about our first intimate encounter. After that first magical night, I planned to make everything official. I already had a ring, and I knew for sure that we would spend our whole lives together. Tomorrow at this time, Sarah will become my bride. That was the last box, I said, wiping sweat from my forehead after hauling all our things. Thank you, Liam. You are the best guy in the world, Sarah exclaimed, lying on the sofa. Sarah didn't like pet names, not after everything she heard addressed to her at school, so we always called each other by our first names. I would have liked to use something cute or gentle, but I could see why she was against it. I watched her lying on the sofa with a medical textbook in her hands. She has changed a lot over the past few years, losing weight and gaining a more toned figure. Her weight never bothered me, but Sarah said her studies inspired her to take better care of her body. I looked at her firm buttocks, tightly clad in leggings, but felt too guilty to hold my gaze. For me, she had always been the most beautiful girl, but now I was sure any guy would agree with me. As her body became slimmer, her breasts remained the same size, always clearly visible under her new tight shirts. I lay down next to her, hugging the love of my life and gently kissing her neck. "You are so beautiful," I told her. "Maybe you can take a break from studying, and we can try out the new bed." "You'll have to wait until night, mister," she answered with a smile on her face. "I want everything to be perfect before we make love." She was right, of course. I was just impatient. Our first time was supposed to be a magical moment, and there was no need to rush. We had our whole lives ahead of us. I leaned down to kiss her on the lips, but we were interrupted by a sudden knock on the door. "Were we waiting for someone?" I asked. It is unlikely that we could have guests for a housewarming party. Who could it be? "Can you check? Maybe the neighbors came to meet each other." I wish I had just stayed next to Sarah until the knocking stopped. Instead, I walked towards the front door, exposing our lives to the man standing behind it. "Hello, guys. How many years, how many winters?" Just the sound of his voice sent shivers through my body. He had gotten even more toned since we last saw him, his muscular arms showing off in his white tank top. The tight shorts did little to hide anything, and the bulge in the crotch was too noticeable. His face and body had matured, but I would never forget the sound of his voice. "What are you doing here, Callum?" I asked firmly, without the former fear. "Relax, asshole. I'm not going to pull your pants down or force you to drink from the toilet like before." I changed after school. His wide grin said otherwise. The bastard couldn't have changed that much. He enjoyed the moment while I cringed from the memories of the past humiliation. But this time I was not going to back down. "It was nice to see you, but we are busy." I tried to slam the door, but he easily held it open. "Who is this, Liam?" Sarah asked, approaching the door. I turned around to explain, but noticed how casually she sat on the couch. Her black leggings rode up slightly, and her loose tank top fit her like she was completely comfortable in the space. She didn't seem to care about how she looked from the outside, and it was part of her natural charm. Callum, entering the room, looked around and grinned. "Honestly, Sar, have you always looked so relaxed? Maybe if you had been as confident in school, you wouldn't have had to endure this guy's company." He laughed, clearly not attaching much meaning to the words, and sat down on the arm of the sofa. "Okay, just kidding. You really are a great couple, and it's very cozy here." His words sounded like slight mockery, but I knew that there was no malicious intent behind them. However, old grievances always resurface at such moments. Sarah just smiled and moved the conversation to another topic, not letting the past ruin the evening. "We were just moving. How did you find our address?" Callum walked right past us and slammed his butt onto the couch, causing all of Sarah's books to fly across the room. "I was going to visit you separately, but your family said you just moved out." He placed his dirty feet on the couch next to him, leaning back as we both stood there, stunned. "Do you mind if I get myself a drink? I would like to apologize to you." Despite the audacity of this man to break into our house and demand a drink, I was about to yell at him to leave when I heard Sarah respond. "Of course, what do you want?" She smiled at him with that sincere kindness that I had only seen in her before. "Bourbon or whiskey would be great." "No problem. I'll get the glass ready, and you get the bottle of whiskey your dad gave us, Liam." That bottle was one of the most expensive things we owned. We weren't big drinkers, but I wasn't about to give the man who was tormenting us our best drink. Maybe something non-alcoholic is better, because it's too early to start drinking. "Nonsense. This is not a working day. Besides, we weren't going to drink it anyway." Sarah leaned over to open the box of glasses, giving Callum a perfect view of her swaying breasts. "Take 2 glasses," Callum said without even hiding the fact that he was looking at her. I would feel awkward drinking alone. "2 glasses, okay?" She twirled and headed towards the kitchen, her rear swaying in her tight pants as she moved. I had no choice but to take out the bottle and follow her. "Can't we just kick him out?" I asked Sarah when we were far enough away. "This is the guy who made our lives a nightmare." "Oh, it wasn't that bad, and he says he wants to apologize. I think it's our responsibility to listen to him." I didn't want to ruin our first night together with any argument, so I put the matter aside. "We'll let him have 1 drink, say what he wants, and then everything will be fine. Just a small obstacle to our blissful life together. Maybe you could at least change your clothes. Your outfit is a little revealing," I told her as she poured the drinks. "Is it true? I didn't notice. I'll change into something more comfortable, and you get these drinks out for him." The glasses were filled to the brim. Much of the bottle had already been drunk. As a servant, I brought Callum's drinks, placing them on the coffee table next to the sofa. Then, with all the space on the couch taken up by Callum's legs, I sat down in the old rocking chair we had. Callum sipped his drink silently, and I wasn't about to start any small chit-chat. We both sat in awkward silence as we waited for Sarah to return. Sarah came out of our bedroom wearing a new set of silk pajamas that I had never seen before. The sleeveless tank top with spaghetti straps really showed off her cleavage, and the skimpy bra she was thankfully still wearing only enhanced the effect. The shorts were more like underwear in how much they covered, and would definitely show a bit of her butt if she bent over. "What do you think? Pretty sexy, huh?" Sarah said as she posed seductively. "Damn, where was that sexy bitch hiding? These legs are incredible," Callum shouted from the couch. "Oh, thanks, Callum." Sarah blushed visibly. "But I asked Liam. I bought them for our first night together." "Wow, you really look amazing. But maybe you could wear them without a guest here." "I'm sure he doesn't mind. I just wanted to look pretty for you." Sarah made the same splash she did when I unintentionally upset her. "Baby, I don't mind at all. Sit down and I'll tell you why I'm here. He leaned back from the couch and patted the space next to him. Luckily, Sarah sat down on the other end of the couch, but without batting an eye, Callum slid in next to her. The sight of her soft, bare thighs pressed against Callum made my skin crawl, but I held it in. It had to be over soon, I told myself, then I could enjoy Sarah's outfit. So, I wanted to apologize for my behavior. Callum began, quickly adding, "Oh, don't forget to drink, Sarah." This may have been the first time he called her by her real name, a fact that must have confused her. Without hesitation, she took the whiskey and began drinking it like a regular drink. She somehow managed to drink half the glass before stopping. "MHHH, wow, that stings," she said, clearly having difficulty after drinking so much. "I love it, it feels so good in my mouth." "Well, seeing you, another part of me begins to feel good too." He winked at her, and her blush deepened. I wasn't about to let the bastard flirt with my future bride, so I tried to cut him off. "Tell me I want to try." "I thought it was too early to drink," Callum replied, staring at me. "That's right, Liam, and I don't think you'll like it. You always prefer fruity drinks," Sarah added, taking another small sip of whiskey. It was a gift from my own father, and I wasn't even allowed to try it. My frustration continued to simmer, but I said nothing more. "So you want to apologize?" I said, trying to speed up the process. "That's right, yes." Callum brought his hand to the back of the sofa above Sarah, taking a step to wrap his arms around her. "I wanted to tell you that, looking back, I was an idiot." Sarah looked at him with wide eyes, clearly believing every word he said. I understood better that there must be a reason for his sudden change of heart. "Both of you," he continued. "So I'm sorry. I'm sorry I treated you like that." "This is all?" I asked. "After years of suffering, is this all you have?" "I think that's enough," Sarah intervened. "I accept the apology, Callum. It's all gone." She was more animated than usual, probably already a little drunk. She leaned against him, and no one noticed how he raised his hand to hers. His muscular arms pressed against her soft ones. "There's one more thing," Callum said, looking into my eyes. "I need a place to stay for a day or two." "Absolutely not," I answered without hesitation, not about to let him ruin our first night together. "Wait a second, let's hear him out. Don't you have anywhere to go?" she asked with innocent, sincere concern. She leaned over and sat comfortably next to him. He removed his hand from her arm and began stroking up and down her sides. His hand slid under her loose top, touching her bare skin. I told myself that she would never allow such a touch if she were sober, but there were more important problems right now. My parents kicked me out, and my friends don't have a place now. If I could stay a little longer, I could come to my senses. His hand was high up her shirt. If I didn't know better, I might have thought he was holding one of her breasts. There is no way Sarah would have allowed this. I couldn't even touch them. "A few nights won't be so bad, and maybe we can use this time to heal past wounds." Sarah pretended to be touched, but I just couldn't let her have her way this time. "But what about our romantic night together?" I begged, hoping that the thought of us finally being physically intimate would convince her. "It won't feel right after you throw away someone who needs help." She adopted a firmer tone that was rarely heard from her. "I won't be a burden to you, and I can truly make up for everything I've caused you," he said, managing to sound as if his being here was a favor to us. Sarah looked at me from the side. A slight intoxication still remained on her face. Callum's hand was still high up her shirt, and at this point I wasn't sure if she even realized it was touching her body. The man claimed that he wouldn't cause any problems, but he was already causing more tension in our relationship than in the last 2 years. "Please, Liam, I don't mind waiting a little longer," she asked, her decision already firm. "Can't we leave him?" "Okay, he can stay, but only for the night." I felt terrible letting that bastard stay here, but one night shouldn't have been so bad. "Hooray!" Sarah exclaimed, jumping up to hug me. "Thank you, Liam. This is really the right decision." I never refused a hug from Sarah, but I was also acutely aware of how she was positioned. While I was still sitting in the rocking chair, Sarah had to lean over to hug me. Her bottom was bent, facing Callum directly. The thin, silky material stretched over her ass, exposing it to Callum. "Well, how about we all start unpacking these boxes?" I said as I stood up from the rocking chair and pulled away from Sarah's hug. "Oh, you don't want us to do that," Callum said, standing up and placing himself between us. We were drinking. "He has a point, Liam. I'm already feeling giddy. Why don't you finish while I entertain our guests?" Sarah might have been a little drunk, but I couldn't believe a guy like Callum would get drunk so easily. However, if I cleaned everything up, it would be a great excuse to not talk to him all night. "Okay, I guess I'll start then." "Toast," Callum said as he gave Sarah her drink back. "Here's to a great moving party." He smashed his glass against Sarah's with far more force than was necessary. The intensity of the action must have surprised her because the entire glass flew back, showering her breasts with whiskey. "Oh, what a fool," Sarah laughed as she looked at her cleavage. "Do we have anything to dry this out, Liam?" "Give me a second. I think we have towels." I was surprised how calm she was now, but maybe it was because of the alcohol. "There's no time for this, child," Callum said as he took off his shirt. Without hesitation, he began wiping her breasts, a thin layer of cloth being the only thing separating his hands from her soft skin. "I don't understand why I ever made fun of these chest bags," he said, lowering his hand to my girlfriend's cleavage. "They're really beautiful." "Get your hands off her chest now," I exploded at him. Did he really think such behavior was appropriate? "Relax, man, I'm just getting her cleaned up." Callum took it off, holding his hands in the air innocently, even sacrificed his shirt to do it. "Relax, Liam, he didn't touch me or anything. You don't have to protect me like that." I didn't like her taking his side. She didn't understand how twisted some boys could be. "I just don't think it's appropriate to have your hands anywhere near her breasts." "We're all adults here, Liam. A little touching won't kill anyone. Besides, her breasts are so big that I would have to leave the room to avoid having my hands near them." Callum pretended it was a joke, but I knew that was exactly what Sarah hated. "Oh, stop it," Sarah laughed, smiling at his comment. Was she really drunk enough to just laugh about it? "Looks like a few drops got on your shirt." Callum pointed at her chest, but I couldn't see anything from where I was sitting. "Oh, I see. Yes, I need to wash this urgently." My jaw nearly dropped when I saw Sarah take off her shirt in front of Liam. Her lacy black bra highlighted the pale white mountains of her breasts. She slowly removed her dress, keeping her breasts up and towards Callum. "The washing machine is ready, right, Liam?" she asked casually. "Why, yes, maybe put on a new shirt first." I had never seen her in this state, and, to be honest, I didn't know how to deal with it. With this kind of material, it's better to wash it right away. I won't do it for a long time. She walked away, and I turned my attention to Callum. That bastard was looking straight at her ass when she walked into the laundry room. That damned mocking grin never left his annoying face. "I better go help her," he said, walking away without looking at me. Who knows what she'll do when she's that drunk? They stayed there much longer than necessary. I heard muffled laughter and conversations outside the door, and maybe even the sound of a slap. Perhaps Callum tried to do something and Sarah slapped him back. I desperately wanted to rush inside and see what was happening, but I already knew what would happen next. Sarah will say that I don't trust her or that I'm too controlling. She was clearly in the mood today, and I wasn't about to let suspicion ruin our perfect life together. Eventually, they left the room, and I couldn't believe my eyes. Sarah wasn't just shirtless, she also took off her shorts. Now she was only wearing a bra and a lace thong, which made her ass look even bigger than it already was. "See, I told you you'd like them," Sarah said to Callum, noticing the way I was looking at her. "Looks like you're right, then you win the bet," Callum said, hugging her again. "What's happening?" I couldn't believe the way they were acting, even though Sarah had had a few drinks. "Callum didn't think you'd appreciate it." She pointed down at her exposed underwear. but I knew you'd like it, so we made a small bet. That's not. Why are you just in your underwear? I was shocked. How did she not understand what I was talking about? Oh, that's right. Well, I thought it might be better to dry them all at the same time. I want to make sure they're both in perfect condition for you. She came over and kissed me on the cheek, her warm body pressed against me. It was a moment I wanted to appreciate alone. But now my mind was focused on Callum, who was looking straight at her ass. Thank you, Sarah, I said, trying to sound sincere. You must be cold. Let's dress you in something warm and thick. I'm actually quite hot, she exclaimed, jumping and leaning back onto the couch. She fell with such force that her breasts almost fell out of her bra. I really don't think I'm comfortable dressing like this when we have a guest. Oh, relax, boy. Callum hit me hard on the back, knocking my breath out. It's a party, we're just having fun. Yes, it's a party. Sarah stood on the sofa and began to dance to non-existent music, swaying her hips back and forth. And like Callum said, I don't show more than I do in a bikini. So it was his idea, why I wasn't surprised. In a way, they were right, even if I had never seen Sarah wear a two-piece bikini before. However, what made my blood boil the most was the thought that Callum was able to see her in such sexy lingerie before I did. Maybe we shouldn't jump on the sofa. I don't want you to trip. The only thing that could make this nightmare worse would be to see my loved one get hurt. Okay, Sarah said with a mischievous smile. Catch me. She jumped off the couch towards me as I prepared to catch her, and suddenly I was pushed to the ground. Callum pushed me and pulled Sarah away from him. He grabbed her bare ass tightly and held it high enough that her breasts were pressed against his face. He let go before I could attack him, but the smirk on his face said he knew what he was doing. Sorry, brother, your weak hands couldn't catch her. Especially when her two thick breasts are so heavy. Okay, that's enough. You tried to touch her all night. I stood up, putting myself between this bully and the love of my life. Hey, this is a serious accusation. I have a girlfriend, you know, and I don't like that you accuse me of cheating on her. Come on, Liam, please don't ruin the mood. We're just having fun, Sarah pleaded with me. I didn't think this was all fun, but I just caught that liar. If you have a girlfriend, why don't you stay with her then? I said smugly, ruining his main argument as to why he stayed here. We are in a long-distance relationship, brother. She doesn't live nearby. Come on, Liam, after the 2 years we've had, you should be more empathetic. Sarah stood between us, holding both of our hands. Can we promise not to fight, guys? I know we didn't get along before, but that was in high school. I'd really rather forget it ever happened and just move on with our lives. Perhaps I was allowing our past history to influence my perception of Callum now. Did I just see him as rude and inappropriate behavior where there really isn't any? My instinct was telling me not to trust him, but maybe he had changed and I just couldn't see it. Okay, no more arguing, I said, trying to relieve the tension within myself. I'm sorry if I gave you the wrong impression. I really want us to be friends now, Callum said. He still had that annoying smirk, but I guess that was just his constant expression. I'm so happy, guys, group hugs. Sarah pushed us into a hug, wrapping her arms around us. I could have sworn Callum's hand was dangerously close to her ass, but I couldn't really tell without obviously looking. I'll have to trust the goodness of Sarah's instincts, trust that Callum really doesn't care about my future bride. Well, now that everything is settled, I need to settle my bet. Callum stepped back from the group hug, leaving me alone with Sarah. Right, what was this bet anyway? The winner of the bet gets a massage from the loser. Sarah was almost in anticipation. She always liked my messages. There's nothing better than seeing them relax her after a long day of studying. Not to mention touching her soft, naked skin always turned us both on. We never had the chance to turn this excitement into something more, and thinking about it only made me more irritated by Callum's presence. That is, like a head or foot massage, right? I asked, hoping that Callum's hands wouldn't slide over my girlfriend's body. Full body massage, only the best for a lady, Callum announced, returning from the bathroom with a bottle of baby oil. I hope you don't mind me using some of your oil, baby. It's Sarah's oil, I answered dryly, brushing aside his provocation. For shaving, I don't think so. I think it will feel amazing, Sarah interrupted me. Should I lie down on the sofa? That would be ideal. Liam, how about you light some candles for ambience? Callum waved his hand around Sarah and led her to the sofa, leaving me to light the candles while they began. Callum knelt next to Sarah and began to massage her legs and feet, slowly working his way up her body. I wanted to stay close to watch Callum's hands, but that would have left me standing awkwardly on the sidelines. Instead, I sat back in the recliner, my view of his hands blocked by his toned, bare back. Wow, this is amazing, Sarah moaned as Callum reached her thighs. You'd be surprised how good my hands are at pleasing you, Callum whispered. Now, for the sake of our friendship, I want to warn you both that I am going to touch Sarah's fat ass. This is really necessary, I said, referring to both the action and the way he called her ass. I'm a trained massage therapist, Liam. There's nothing sexy about it. A good butt massage can really reduce muscle tension. Is he now a massage therapist? I wasn't sure I believed it, but I promised to trust this guy more. At least he mentioned it in advance. That had to mean something, right? I think my butt could use a good deep massage, Sarah purred. Please, Callum, do whatever you think is necessary. How do you feel? Is it strong enough for you? I couldn't see his hands, but they were probably now stroking my lover's naked butt. Oh, this feels so good, but I can do it harder, Sarah moaned louder and deeper as Callum's hands slid over her ass. Let me smooth out this knot. I need a little deeper. Oh yes, this is exactly the place. I saw the pleasure reflected on Sarah's face. Sorry, Liam, but his hands are much nicer than yours. I felt bad watching these two, but this would all end soon, I told myself. Just survive one hell of a night, and we'll be back to our loving lives together. Don't worry, Liam. Callum looked at me as his hands continued to work on Sarah's ass. I'm much more experienced than you, and experience is what a girl is looking for. These are big, strong hands, Sarah laughed. That always helps, Callum chuckled. Maybe another time I'll show you how to properly touch a woman. I know that I would love to get another massage, Sarah moaned. Yeah, thanks. Maybe we can do this, I said through clenched teeth. I wasn't sure how much longer I could remain polite and civilized. Time for your backs, ginger breasts. But I'm not finished yet. I'll open these knots later, but now let's take off this bra. Callum skillfully unfastened her bra. Sorry, why do you need to take off her bra? I really wanted to be good for Sarah, but it was too much. Do you want that beautiful bra she bought for you to be covered in oil? Callum replied sharply. Use your baby brain to think a little. I think it shouldn't be difficult for a trained massage therapist to massage around him. I raised my voice. Guys, please, Sarah said. You promised to behave well. Now, Liam, it's okay. He's a professional. You can take off my bra, Callum. Callum smiled at me before removing her bra again. Sarah lifted herself up so he could take it off, and from the angle I was watching, I couldn't tell if he was touching her or seeing too much. It was a little humiliating to be told off like that, and then have another man remove my lover's bra. I, of course, never had the opportunity to film it myself and was hoping to be the first guy to do so. Sarah began to moan again as Callum's hands slid down her back. He spent more time at the top, where her breasts would pop out if her sides weren't right. Desperately, I wanted to run up and stop him, kick him out of the house, and spend the night alone with my sweet, kind girlfriend. But perhaps I was too harsh on Callum again. He really didn't do anything that doesn't happen in a real massage, and he seemed to really know how to do it. I needed to calm down and trust Sarah. She wouldn't let him cross the line. Time for the best part, Callum said, running his hands over her ass once more. It's time to turn over, ginger breasts. No, I said firmly. She won't roll over without her top. You really need to calm down, little one, Callum said, casually placing his hand on Sarah's plump ass. I told you that I work professionally. Of course I will cover her huge mammary glands. The vulgar way he called Sarah's body really irritated me. She was too pure and innocent to be talked about like that. Sarah was probably doing it out of politeness, but I knew it was tearing her apart inside. I'm in very good hands, Liam. You don't need to be so nervous. Sarah looked at me and smiled a reassuring smile. I knew in my head that I shouldn't focus on it, but my heart almost couldn't take it anymore. I always thought she liked my massages, but she never responded to them the way she does now with Callum. I'll go get a towel for you, I said, approaching the bathroom. Everything was only half unpacked, but we had towels hanging on the shelf. I could have just taken one of them, but I knew we had one that was larger than normal. It would be large and tight to completely protect Sarah's modesty, and Callum wouldn't know there were smaller ones. It took a few minutes to dig through the boxes without making a mess in the bathroom. I heard Sarah's moan echo through the halls. Callum must have been massaging her back, but harder this time. Along with her soft moans, she exclaimed, "Oh," and "ah," and I think I even heard Callum moaning, so he was probably working really hard. I returned with a towel in my hands and immediately noticed that something was wrong. Callum was no longer on the floor, but standing on top of Sarah. Again, this seemed somewhat normal for a massage, but it felt like an invisible boundary had been crossed. "I have a towel, Callum, so you can get off and let her." I stopped mid-sentence, moving closer. When I looked at the back of the sofa, two things caught my eye. Firstly, Callum clearly did not respect the boundaries of what was permitted by standing too close to Sarah. Secondly, the situation looked strange and awkward. Sarah was lying on her back, and her shoulders and décolleté were glistening with massage oil. Callum seemed to be too busy doing the massage, and his movements looked inappropriate. On her skin lay two plastic cards, which were probably used for some strange and incomprehensible massage trick. However, they could barely stay in place and looked like they were about to fall off. The atmosphere was tense, and what was happening clearly went beyond the standard massage procedure. What the hell is this? I thought we agreed that she would be covered. I threw the towel down, almost screaming at them as Callum continued to grope her breasts in front of me. "You took too long, dude. I had to use what was at hand." The man didn't even bother to look me in the eyes, instead continuing to look around at Sarah's bare chest. "It's still covered, and that's what you wanted, right? You call it a cover, these cards are about to fall. And why did you take off your pants?" So many things were wrong, I didn't even know what to be angry about in the first place. "Please, Liam, don't raise your voice. I'm trying to relax," Sarah said calmly, giving me an expressive look. There was a slight irritation in her tone, but also a bit of confidence. I noticed Callum standing nearby and seemingly helping Sarah with some manipulations. She continued speaking before I could ask questions. "You don't have to worry about the prepared cards." Callum carefully arranged everything so that everything would stay in place. She sounded like it was the most obvious fact in the world. Her explanation continued. "His jacket had to be taken off so as not to get the oil all over it. A towel, by the way, wouldn't have helped the situation either." I looked around at them and noticed that Callum was diligently performing his duties. Despite the strangeness of the situation, they both seemed to be quite happy with what was happening. My gaze was involuntarily drawn to their interaction, but I chose not to go into details. Perhaps I should have just trusted their words and not looked for hidden meaning where there was none. I can't watch this. I felt dizzy, seeing how the man who was torturing us was attacking the body of my girlfriend, barely dressed. "Stay, Liam," Callum ordered, as if he were talking to a dog. "Let me explain and show the technique. You will see that there is nothing suspicious here." I was torn between two thoughts. On the one hand, I needed something to show me that I was thinking too much. Having his hands all over Sarah's breasts didn't fit the woman I loved. On the other hand, staying would mean watching the lewd spectacle, watching Callum touch and grope Sarah's breasts before I had a chance to intervene. The uncertainty was killing me, but I knew what I had to do. "Okay," I said, the deep pit in my stomach only growing larger when I decided to watch, but I couldn't leave Sarah alone with this freak. Show me the technique. What is it called? Callum smiled and patted me on the back, his olaginous hands beginning to smear my shirt. Apparently, it doesn't matter if my clothes are covered in oil. Well done, he said mockingly. You've been with Ginger Breasts for 2 years now, right? It's time for you to learn how to satisfy her. He's doing his best, Sarah said. She was no doubt trying to protect me, but that only made me look even more pathetic. However, I appreciated her concern and support. Go get us a new bottle of oil, then we can get started, Callum told me. But there's still a lot in this bottle, right? Callum took the bottle and unscrewed the cap, pouring the remaining contents over Sarah's body. Excess oil dripped straight from it, soaking the sofa and our carpet. Even more things that were normally covered in oil, I supposed. You see, even with her new sexy slender body, this oil was still not enough, he reproached me. It would be enough if you didn't just pour everything out and make a mess on our couch. I continued to speak evenly, suppressing as much irritation as possible. You can just go get the other one, Liam, Sarah asked me. The other one has another one in the bathroom boxes. I didn't remember if I saw her when I took the towel, but I guess I just didn't notice. Sarah had a good memory and knew better where things were. Okay, but don't start here without me. I didn't trust Callum not to overstep the boundaries without my presence. I went back to the bathroom and started looking through the boxes again, leaving Callum to my girlfriend. My first attempt was unsuccessful, so I checked again, a third time now. I didn't hear any groans or signs that Callum had started, just quiet laughter. It was good to know that he respected that boundary, at least. I stopped looking in the boxes, as Sarah had told me, and tried looking in the closet. There it sat, among Sarah's other groceries, which she must have put away. She was obviously still under the influence. Normally, she would never forget something like that, and it's not like she was lying to me. I walked back out and saw Callum stand up straight again. He seemed to have just pressed himself against her, but I could clearly see his toned chest without any oil. Maybe he was just stretching. I found the bottle, but it wasn't in. I stopped, looking at the sofa and at Sarah. Everything looked normal, but something was wrong. These cards, have they changed places? I asked, voicing my sudden thought. At first it seemed absurd, but the more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that something was wrong. Do you seriously think that I'm flirting with Callum behind your back? Sarah looked at me with such anger that I had never seen before. Do you really think I could do that? No, no, of course not, I replied hastily, raising my hands in a conciliatory gesture. It sounds weird, that's all. Then how do you explain this? She lifted the cards slightly, showing them to me. I felt a little uneasy, but said nothing. After all, Callum probably didn't even notice anything unusual, even though his gaze was directed there. I must be mistaken. Sorry, Sarah. My mind must have been playing along with me with all the anxiety I was feeling. I did remember that they were different, but Sarah would never do such a thing. Are you done insulting your girlfriend? Callum gave me that same smug grin. Let's get back to these. Part of me almost wanted them to fall out. I'd been waiting years to see them. I waited as long as Sarah wanted, of course, but part of me longed to see her naked. I knew it was wrong, especially with Callum right on top of her, but the desire was there. Luckily, Callum stopped shaking her breasts and the cards kept her modest. Why don't you pour some more oil on those thick breasts? Callum told me. I didn't understand why Sarah was so reluctant to scold him for his language, but I wasn't about to fight. She was already in her bad books, and I didn't want to risk pissing her off even more. I took the bottle and squeezed out a few drops, being careful not to do too much and make more of a mess. Is that all? Let me show you how a pro does it. Callum confidently grabbed the bottle from my hands and began to demonstrate his method, vigorously gesturing and accompanying his actions with explanations. Okay, now look carefully. It is important to approach this with confidence, but with understanding. He continued his explanation, emphasizing each movement. Sarah listened carefully, nodding occasionally and following his instructions. His movements were confident but devoid of any grace. He put all his energy into the process, trying to show how best to achieve the desired result. Sarah seemed completely immersed in what was happening, closing her eyes and sighing quietly from time to time. The main thing is to find the right rhythm, Callum added, continuing the demonstration and intently watching Sarah's reaction. After a while, I began to notice that the situation was becoming somewhat awkward. Callum, carried away by the process, did not notice at all how close he was to Sarah. I carefully cleared my throat and said, Callum, maybe we should back off a little. It seems you got too carried away. Callum froze for a moment, realizing my words, and took a step back with an awkward smile. Oh yes, you're right. I just got too carried away with explanations. Okay, I think now you understand everything. The atmosphere cleared up a bit, and everyone returned to a more neutral and relaxed tone of communication, trying not to focus on the moment that had happened. Is it true? Sarah, do you feel anything? Callum asked. God, she muttered, and then continued in a normal voice. I think everything is fine. Her moans became deeper and longer. The combination of alcohol and relaxation must have made it difficult for her to feel him. Just to be sure, let me adjust my technique a little, Callum said, moving his hand in the area between Sarah and himself. He leaned forward slightly, preventing me from fully seeing his movements. Is it better this way, Sarah? How does it feel? Yes, yes, she answered barely audibly. Her voice was tense, and despite the relaxing massage, she looked more worried than calm. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what exactly was going on. But I told myself, trust Sarah. She has always been a person who knows her boundaries and will not allow herself to do anything inappropriate. She's too respected to let someone like Callum go too far. However, the situation was causing me internal discomfort, and I decided it was time to end this massage. The atmosphere was becoming increasingly tense, and I didn't want it to get any more out of control. I think I understand the technique, I said. How about we go have dinner early? Dining out was a little expensive for me, but I had enough to cover the cost for myself and Sarah. It was worth stretching the budget to get us to a public place where Callum would probably run off and find another girl to woo. I still didn't believe in this supposed out-of-town girl. You know, I think this is a great idea. Callum pulled out his hand and slowly pulled away from Sarah. I noticed that her panties were slightly shiny with oil, as if a few drops had somehow penetrated the fabric. But I'm not finished, Sarah said, pouting at Callum. We have all night to finish, he said with a grin. Great, they were going to continue the massage again. I hoped that at least they would forget about it after dinner. Sarah looked upset, but just sighed. Then I watched her get up from the couch. She did it so casually that she must have forgotten that she was not wearing a top. Helplessly, I watched, as if in slow motion, as she moved upward, spinning towards Callum. She finished standing behind me and stretched her arms upward as I stood there in silent stupor. Saw Sarah, your breasts. I was finally able to stutter. Callum, for his part, just watched, admiring my girlfriend's bare breasts. Oh, exactly. She covered herself with her hands, moving much slower than I would like. Sorry, I didn't think about that. I didn't know what to say. Callum had just seen my girlfriend's breasts before I even had a chance to see what they looked like. I wanted to scream. I wanted to kick Callum out. Why did he even think that something so unreliable would keep her covered? I stuttered before being interrupted. It's okay, Sarah. It was an accident, Callum said, placing his hands on her shoulders. They are quite beautiful. There is no need to apologize for exposing them. He laughed and headed to our bedroom. Do you mind if I take your shirt, Liam? He said more as a statement than a question, and I was unable to stop him. Are you okay, Liam? Sarah asked, still covering herself. I'm just a little shocked. Being alone and talking to Sarah helped, but I still felt excruciating pain inside me. I know, but it's just skin. Does it really matter that he saw them? Well, no, maybe. I haven't even seen them yet. You still have to wait, Sarah said, stopping me before I could even ask. It will make our first time more magical. Thinking about it made me feel much better. Yes, Callum saw her breasts first, but Sarah was still mine. Things didn't go to plan, but a change of scenery to a nice quiet restaurant will calm us all down. Perhaps Sarah and I could even get our own table. A little time together somewhere romantic will really calm my heart. I'm so glad you're inviting me to dinner, Liam, Callum shouted from our room, because there is a place where I have long wanted to go. Callum walked out of our room wearing my gray sweatpants, his abs and chest still shirtless and on display. His protruding groin was quite visible through the material. I turned away but noticed Sarah was still looking at him. Sometimes her innocence surprised me. I would have thought she would have been able to understand what was going on, but she didn't seem shocked by it. I should probably discuss this with her to avoid awkward situations, but there was no time now. Sarah had a hungry look in her eyes, and when she's like that, there's no stopping her. You will definitely love this place. They have the strongest drinks in the city. Callum grinned, and Sarah still stood without a top, covering herself with her hands. Can you get my wallet out of my pants, dude? I would have advised him to do it himself, but at that time just doing it meant leaving the apartment faster. I wasn't sure about his idea of going out to dinner. I mean, what is the difference between drinks if we're going to dinner? Either way, we could sort it out together as soon as we get outside. I walked past Sarah to grab Callum's wallet from his shorts and turned around just in time to see Callum's next move. Catch, he said, tossing one of Sarah's shirts to her. An object suddenly flew towards her and she reacted as usual, raising her hands to grab her shirt. I couldn't blame her for it, but she unintentionally exposed her breasts in front of Callum again. Twice in just a few minutes, Callum had seen her bare breasts, while denying me the opportunity to do so. Sarah, I said, pointing at her chest as she turned her head to look at me. All right, I'm really not used to these things just hanging out. She laughed as if it didn't matter, putting on the shirt. These puppies should be free. Callum came up and snatched the wallet from my hands. My girlfriend says that bras only create problems for large breasts. This can't be true. Now I was sure that this girl was fictitious. No real girl would think it was true. This is true, Sarah said, nodding her head. One of our teachers noted that large breasts like mine are better without a bra. Wait, seriously? This can't be. It didn't make any sense. But Sarah knew more than I did. Maybe she misunderstood the teacher. Okay, let's go, Callum said, taking control of my idea to go out to dinner. Wait a second, Sarah isn't dressed yet. Sarah was wearing one of her big nightgowns. She liked it because of the cute teddy bear design on the front and the thin white material. It barely covered her ass, but any quick movement would give someone a chance to see her underwear. Her body was still covered in oil. Her shirt was becoming almost transparent. Her breasts were covered by a tighter pattern at the front, but her panties were clearly visible underneath. In fact, wasn't that the reason why she was stripping? To avoid this very situation. Now Callum wanted her to dress like that in public. The place we're going to opens in a few hours, and it has a dress code. Callum started explaining before I could ask a question. I looked through your clothes, and you don't have anything suitable, so we'll need to buy something new. We have some time to kill, so we might as well walk around a bit. But it's just a shirt, and it becomes transparent. She needs to at least put on pants. I was the only sane one, but the way Callum spoke almost made me feel like I was crazy. Relax, their child, she has everything covered. Callum rubbed his hair, brushing off my protest. You don't want her to have to wear a whole different outfit all night, do you? I could use a break from the constricting bras and pants, too. Sarah smiled at me, as if everything was normal in the world. With a body as small as yours, you don't realize how restrictive things can be on all this. She gave her ass a squeeze for emphasis. The shirt was now sticking to her skin, and the compression left a small portion of her cheeks exposed. They walked away without me, thinking our discussion was over. I realized I still needed to find my wallet and keys when they arrived at the door. I called for them to wait, but they must not have heard, so I ran around the apartment, collecting everything I needed. They were walking side by side when I caught up with them, Callum with his hand on Sarah's shoulder, as if they were a couple. Somehow, Sarah's shirt slid even higher. Her ass was almost completely exposed now, and I assumed her front was visible too. Because of the narrow path, I had to walk behind them, making a voice. Sarah, your shirt has slipped a little. Is it true? Sarah looked down over her shoulder. Can you fix it for me, Cal? With pleasure, sweet chick, Callum said, reaching down to grab her ass. He squeezed it tightly, pretending to lower his shirt, but barely moving it down. Sarah probably thought he was just covering for her, but the bastard took every opportunity to spank her. She was still completely naked. Why did he return his hand? But I was more worried about something else. Feces, I said, turning it into a question. Sarah let out a giggle, not as playful as usual. It was rather cheerful or almost condescending. I thought since he keeps calling me cutie, I should give him a name in return. Just a little playful teasing since we're all friends now, Callum said, looking at me with his devilishly mocking grin. The idiot didn't even realize what she was doing. He probably thought he was winning by calling her such a derogatory name when she gave him a normal cute name. He didn't know that she hated pet names, so using one of them was a clear sign of her attitude. I grinned at him now, feeling more confident than I had at any time since he arrived. Everything will be fine. We will head straight to the clothing store and dress Sarah properly. Then we'll have a nice dinner and maybe go to bed early. Callum will leave the next morning, and I will be alone again with the most beautiful girl in the world. Hopefully the shops aren't too far away. Sarah is already turning heads, and the sooner she gets dressed, the better. Oh, I have an idea, Callum said, and I immediately knew that this was not going to be something I would like. Let me buy you another bottle, to compensate for everything I drank and everything, Callum said, sounding innocent enough. It was an unusually kind gesture, and if it weren't for Sarah's condition, I would have had no objections. In her current form, wearing an almost see-through shirt that clung to her body, I just wanted her to be changed. That's nice of you, Callum, I said to her back as he walked shoulder to shoulder with my girlfriend. But maybe we should buy it after you both get dressed for real. Nonsense, Liam, the bottle shop is on the way, Callum said. With that, the debate ended. Callum and Sarah seemed to move forward, turning the heads of every passerby that passes by. At least it was a short stop, and they caught glimpses of the inside and outside without too many people paying attention to Sarah. As awkward as it was to walk behind them, it gave me a great view of Sarah's ass. It didn't feel right to spy on my own girlfriend's ass, but I couldn't resist looking at the way her sexy black lingerie was spreading her butt cheeks. The excitement lessened a little knowing everyone could see her, but it was still exciting. We continued to walk into the more fashionable part of town, where there were more cafes and shops, and a younger crowd ready to ogle Sarah's body. I knew she was proud of how much weight she had lost over the years, but she almost seemed excited and happy when some crooked guy called her names as we walked by. She's probably too shy to confront them. It's better to just ignore their perverted comments. We had been walking for a while and had already passed several different bottle shops, but Callum showed no interest in them. Perhaps they had a poor selection or were too expensive. I didn't know why else we bypassed them. Finally, Callum turned into the store, opening the door like a gentleman. He let Sarah through and followed right behind her, letting the door close almost as if he wanted to crash into me. I should have been less accusing, although he acted kindly by replacing the bottle he drank. Why did he do this and then deliberately slam the door on me? Are you there, Art? Callum called into the cramped store. Various bottles stood on the walls, on the central shelves, and were left in boxes on the floor. What? Hi, Callum, the cashier said as he walked out of the back room behind the counter. He was tall, thin, and pale, with short black hair that was messy enough to completely cover his eyes. I don't know how he could see, but he had no problem meeting Callum. Still buying prostitutes everywhere you go. Said the man, Art, I think so. I didn't know what angered me more, the fact that he called Sarah a prostitute, or the fact that he simply assumed that she belonged to Callum. Sorry, sir. I raised my voice, remaining polite but firm. This is my girlfriend you are talking about. I do not condone the use of this kind of language. He looked at me, or at least I think he looked at me, then looked back at Callum. Don't be so defensive, Liam. He meant it as a compliment. Callum said, hugging Sarah, You call a girl easy to get when she's hot and knows how to have fun. You think I'm hot, don't you, Liam? Sarah asked, looking at me. Callum released her from the hug and walked over to Art, giving us a chance to talk privately. You know, I think you're the most beautiful girl in the world, baby. I saw her wince when she used a pet name. Don't you think it was fate that Callum showed up tonight? She asked. It was kind of a counterintuitive question, but I listened. If this is so, then fate is clearly against me. I started laughing, but quickly stopped when I noticed Sarah's serious look. I just think that maybe we should follow his ideas. I'm not sure how much I like his ideas when they constantly expose you to him and the public. Is that the point, Liam? Are you still mad that he saw me naked? What did she mean by, is that the point? Is she mad at me? Does she think I'm mad at her? We missed out on being normal teenagers, right? Because of how we were treated at school, she asked. Because of people like Callum, I thought, but didn't say. Yes, but I think our time together was more valuable than any normal teenage years. Well, maybe now we have a chance to survive some of this. Maybe we will become more free and get new experiences. I think Callum has something important to offer. There was such a different look in her eyes than the Sarah I knew, full of desire that I had never seen. Perhaps this is something she secretly wanted all her life, or has Callum awakened something deep inside her? I knew in my heart that I wanted a quiet life with Sarah and no one else, but for her sake I could try something new. It would only be for one night. I think I'll try to relax. Sarah's face lit up, and she hugged me tightly, her still slipping shirt pressed against me. Thank you, Liam, she said, reminding me why I love her so much, with a big smile on her face. Come here, girl of easy virtue, Callum called. Sarah pulled away from our hug and hurried over to him. I guess allowing a guy to call her easy was part of this new experience. Art needs your help getting our bottle out of the back. Callum was grinning again. You know me, I like to be helpful. She ran with Art, closing the door behind her. Why can't you help him? I asked Callum. He seemed quite capable of getting a bottle off the shelf. Oh, she's in a tough place. Callum laughed, leaning back against the counter. But your girl knows how to dig deeper. I'm guessing it was still lubricated. She could probably fit into tight spaces better than anyone else right now. With such a cramped store, it didn't surprise me that the storage room was equally cramped. Oh, I didn't think it was so big. I heard a noise through the thin walls of the store. Apparently Callum wanted a larger bottle, which may be why it was only in the back. We stood in almost silence, hearing only the occasional moan or scream coming through the walls as Sarah tried to get the bottle. It took longer than I expected, but from the sounds it was clear that the task was not an easy one. In addition to Sarah's moaning and wheezing as she tried to crawl into the narrow space, a wet pop was also heard. I couldn't make out exactly what it was, and the sound appeared irregularly, making it difficult to understand its nature. Perhaps it was just the sound of a strange box falling. Sarah seemed to cry out in surprise after each such sound. I realized that they were almost finished when I heard the wheezing take on a relieved tone. It was strange that Art was wheezing more than Sarah, but he was probably holding some boxes. Sarah walked out the door with a blank expression and a bottle in her hands, clearly tired from the task. The bottle didn't look big. I would say it was smaller than the one we had. Well, was this the experience you were looking for? I joked, watching her approach. She blinked the blank expression out of her eyes and looked at me with an air of awe. What have I missed all these years? The word seemed like a joke, but there was something sincere in her voice. Perhaps she was just playing a role. Why did huddling in the back warehouse have to be what she was missing? "Let's go," Callum said, emphasizing his sentence with a slap on Sarah's buttock. Hearing this sound, my thoughts began to spin. It was like that weird bang earlier. Art must have smacked her ass while she was looking in the back room. Was this the experience she was missing? I think I'm exaggerating things too much. Callum was already so physically intimate with her. I couldn't let any other guy be the same. I wanted her to have this evening, but I needed to set firm boundaries before things got out of control. "Hey, Sarah," I said, following her as we left the store. I was ready to tell her my boundaries when I noticed something was wrong. My thoughts are interrupted by a sudden realization. Sarah had no panties. "What happened to your panties?" I regretted screaming so loudly as we walked down the street, but I couldn't help myself. "Oh, did you notice?" Sarah said, speaking much more calmly than I would have liked in this situation. "I didn't think it would be noticeable under my shirt." "Your shirt is pretty see-through right now." I managed to calm down and lower my voice. I didn't want passers-by to notice us. "How did you lose them?" I couldn't believe she just took them off in front of a random stranger. Not without a good reason, at least. But what good reason could there be for her to take them off? I'm sure it was just an accident, Callum said, sounding pleased as always. I grabbed Sarah's hand, stopping her from moving forward any further. We needed to have a serious conversation, and I wasn't going to do it with Callum constantly interfering. "I need to talk to Sarah." "Callum, you are moving forward." I stared at him, letting him know that I wouldn't take no for an answer. He started to say something, but Sarah stopped him. "It's okay, we'll talk later." It was a little humiliating to see him listen to Sarah more than me, but at least we could talk in private. It was an accident, just like he said. Sarah said, waiting for my question. "Tell me what happened from the moment you entered that room until you left." I couldn't stand the uncertainty. Did Art see her take off her panties? Was he slapping her naked ass? I needed answers from her. "You don't trust me." "I trust you completely." I gently touched her face, gently holding her hand. "I don't trust all these other men not to take advantage of you." "I'm not a child, Liam. I can handle it." She was clearly angry with me again, but I needed to figure everything out. "Please, I am participating in this experiment of new experiences, but I don't want my mind to fill in the blanks with worst-case scenarios." Sarah was silent for a moment, considering my words. I really hoped she knew I trusted her, but I needed reassurance. "Okay, I'll tell you." She didn't look the happiest, but it couldn't be helped. I walked in and Art showed me his, problem. This was the narrow space she needed to reach through. It was big, and I didn't know if I could handle it. But, as we said, I wanted to try. She seemed nervous saying all this, but so far everything sounded normal. Perhaps I put too much pressure on her. At first I used my hands. I needed both of them to grab it properly. "Wouldn't that make things more difficult?" I asked. Of course, trying to grab the bottle with both hands would only make it more difficult to navigate the narrow space. "Oh, that's definitely true." Her nerves seemed to go away the more she talked. We were both getting pretty close, so Art started using his hands to help me. "That's right, that should have been that bang back then." "So Art didn't touch your ass under any circumstances?" I asked, to be 100% sure. "No, not my ass," she said confidently. "We were so close, but my hands weren't enough. I had to use my mouth." Her mouth. I didn't see how this could make sense, but perhaps her hands were busy holding other boxes. Didn't that hurt? Holding the bottle in your mouth shouldn't have been easy. Art was a little hard on me, so yeah, it hurt a little. But this only made the result even better. It made sense, I know. Coming home with muscles from a hard day of work always brought a sense of accomplishment. So it happened then. Art was pulling me out of him, and his hands got stuck in my panties. They tore right on me. I didn't want to tell you because I knew you'd be worried. "So, did he see anything?" I almost didn't dare ask, but I needed to know. No, I don't think so. He was pretty busy. It was a relief, although I didn't like the fact that his arms had to be around her if he was stuck in her underwear. But everything sounded much better than I feared. Thank you for being so honest with me. I pulled her towards me for a passionate kiss, showing her how much I loved her. The bottle must have affected her mouth because her lips tasted different, but I didn't care. Let's hurry back to Callum, Sarah said, breaking away from the kiss. I want to see what outfits he chooses for me. Callum was waiting right in front of us, and I watched with a smug grin as he was forced to walk behind us. Yes, he had seen her naked in places where I had not, but after our conversation I felt closer to Sarah than ever. We walked side by side, finally reaching our destination without further interruption. Callum was surprisingly good. Perhaps my determination had finally earned his respect. Although I think he did accidentally step on Sarah's backside, she squirmed and twitched most of the way. The store seemed local and not some big, expensive chain like I imagined Callum might go to. The name Voluptuous Vixen, upon closer inspection, turned out to be a women's clothing store. Quite a risky store, let me tell you. The clothes leaned more towards fetishistic items rather than something that could be worn in public. I couldn't imagine Sarah wearing any of these, but she seemed excited about the same thing. I guess she was really determined to try anything Callum suggested, even if I knew she wouldn't like it. I got lost in my thoughts, looking at all the different objects and imagining Sarah in them. I was so carried away by my thoughts that I began to involuntarily stare at the girl behind the counter. She rolled her eyes and huffed, walking away before I could apologize to her. While I was busy fantasizing, Callum grabbed some clothes and headed to the fitting rooms with Sarah. Wait, I said, running up. Why is Callum going into the dressing room with you? Someone needs to help her put all this on, Callum said as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. But I'm her boyfriend. This is my task. You can't, Liam. What if you see something while I'm changing? Sarah sounded surprisingly modest for someone wearing only a tight, sheer t-shirt. But the same reason applies to Callum. If she was worried about someone seeing her, then it had to be the guy who had done this many times before. Well, he already saw me, so there's not much point in him looking again. She smiled and went into a private room with Callum, leaving me waiting on the bench alone. I felt quite embarrassed being a man in such a sexy women's clothing store. I noticed that other customers were looking at me, and the same girl initially seemed to be following me. I wanted to just explain that I was waiting for my girlfriend, but without Sarah, it seemed like a weak excuse. I had no idea what could have taken her so long, but finally, after what seemed like 10 minutes, she came out. She looked sexier than I'd ever seen her, even hotter than in my fantasies. She wore large black heels that were slightly shiny. They showed off her bare legs perfectly and highlighted the sexiness of her legs. I'd never seen her wear any kind of heels before, so I was shocked to see her in what could only be described as dance heels. Her top was a tight pink crop top with "Daddy's Girl" written on it in a cute font. The top looked at least 2 sizes too small, especially with her breasts, although this may have been an intentional style. The top hugged her chest tightly, ending just a few inches lower. Because of how tight it was obvious that she wasn't wearing a bra, and any wrong movement of her hand could result in her breasts being exposed to the entire store. What bothered me more was the skirt. It was a plaid school skirt, but pink to match the top. Instead of ending at the knees like it should, this one looked like a scrap of fabric. When Sarah was standing normally, I could see her underwear, and when she twirled, her entire lower half was visible. The entire store could clearly see her little pink tango as it disappeared into her ass. It looked like she was wearing nothing at the back. I didn't even know they made such short skirts and doubted they really existed. The material was fraying at the edges, as if it had been torn, but again, this could have been an odd design choice. "Suo, how do you like it?" Sarah asked me, leaning forward and giving the man and his wife an embarrassing view of her ass. Wow, I didn't know what to say. It was the most incredible way she looked, but at the same time, it didn't quite look like her. "I knew you'd like it," she exclaimed, raising her arms in joy, her top rising and threatening to expose her breasts to the world. I stood up and grabbed her hands, trying to stop her from further involuntary exposure. It's really great, but don't you think you should at least wear a bra? I asked, trying not to suppress her excitement. I know, but this shirt is so tight. She reached for her shirt, holding her own breasts. We tried to put a bra under it, but we couldn't. Okay, that was understandable given her size. At least she tried. Wait a second. What do you mean, we tried? My voice groaned in my throat when I asked a question, already knowing the answer. Callum was trying to help, she said as calmly as she breathed. He was pulling his shirt down while I was holding on to him for support. I knew the bastard wasn't just standing there holding her clothes. He really could find any opportunity to take advantage of Sarah's innocence. And when he was helping you put it on, did he accidentally grab your breast? I asked, again knowing the answer. He tried his best to squeeze these huge things into the top. She moved her breasts for emphasis. But even with his big, strong arms, they just didn't fit. I shuddered internally at the thought of his hands on her breasts. Perhaps this feeling was visible to me because Sarah said it. What's the problem? It's not like he touched me more than before with that massage. I guess she was right. His hands were already caressing her almost naked body. In comparison, some extra touching of the bra wasn't much of a problem. Still, it felt wrong, like a massage, but not in a fitting room. I didn't like it, but Sarah looked so happy and cheerful. I couldn't disappoint her. You're right, I said firmly. It's not a big problem, but... Great, she interrupted me before I could ask her to be more restrained. I'm so glad you agree that touching isn't a big deal. She jumped back into the dimly lit fitting rooms where Callum was waiting for her, because the next outfit is going to need a lot of help. I was left alone again, waiting for Callum to deal with my girlfriend. He could now be touching her breasts, or perhaps her ass, while helping her put on her pants. I had to stop myself from thinking about it. It wasn't sexy. This wasn't something that hadn't happened before. It definitely wasn't a sign that Callum was trying to steal her from me. Sarah was simply trying out his methods for one evening, living out the experiences we didn't get to experience at school. A month later, no, a week later, we will remember and laugh about how stupid today was. I'll make fun of her for the outfits she tries on, and she'll make fun of me for defending myself. This will be a good memory of the strange first day of our life together. A story we will tell our children someday. I didn't know if Callum was being direct or trying to get at Sarah, but I was sure that our love for each other could overcome everything. Cal thought the other outfit was sexier. Sarah's voice made me come to my senses. What about you, Liam? Like a cliché, I rubbed my eye, marveling at her beautiful figure. Her ample breasts peeked out from the tight lace corset wrapped around her breasts. It's clear that it was designed to accentuate the breasts of smaller women, and on Sarah the effect was explosive. The dark and seductive corset contrasted with her shorts, if they could even be called shorts. The blue denim shorts covered less than Sarah's regular panties. They accentuated the fullness of her buttocks, while offering only a small degree of coverage to protect her modesty. She completed the look with a pair of long brown leather boots that perfectly framed the curves of her legs. She had that beautiful country look that suited her personality much better than her last outfit. It was still a lot more skin than she usually showed, but it was much less likely to be exposed than the previous outfit. I love him. This is definitely better than the previous one. My words were true, but perhaps with some encouragement I could push her towards something more modest. Sarah thought, feeling the outfit. No, I think I liked that one better. Of course, my breasts look great, but the skirt looked cuter. I think this one is cute too. I tried to change her mind, but it was clear from her face that it wouldn't work. Cal was right, it's just too self-conscious, and not to mention hard to put on. Sarah waved her arms. It was still shocking to hear her talk about herself like that. I wondered if she felt the same way. Perhaps that's why she does it so often, to experience the experience of talking like those crazy girls at school. And these shorts ride up my ass so much. She slapped her hands on her butt, squeezing them tightly. The material feels so rough when it presses against me like that. Maybe something looser would be better, I asked, trying to find something for her that would cover more. It's not that I don't appreciate seeing her so sexy, but I would have preferred her to wear something more covered around Callum. Also, will the outfits we choose for dinner be appropriate if we have one? I didn't know of any place with a dress code that allowed something like that. When you think about it, you'll probably need something that's more suitable for a restaurant. Maybe, she said, looking at herself, I'll go ask Callum what he thinks. It was annoying to hear her always favor Callum's opinion. I knew she wanted to try his methods, but I wanted her to still listen to my thoughts. Sarah's wait lasted longer than all her previous visits. At least 15 minutes passed without her returning. I knew I could trust her, but my idle mind kept thinking about what Callum could be doing to her. I thought about how much he sees and feels her while I sit here. My mind began to play along, making me think that every sound was a moan, a cry, or the wet clap of flesh on flesh. Finally, after almost 20 minutes, I couldn't stand it anymore and stood up, furious, to go to the fitting rooms. "Sarah, are you okay?" I called, entering a corridor with a row of fitting rooms. The hidden moans and screams seemed even louder when I was here, but the music in the store also increased. My heart began to beat faster and faster. A sharp state of panic seized me. My mind convinced me that something was wrong. I started knocking on the first door, shouting Sarah's name as the music became more sensual. I honestly couldn't tell if every moan I heard was coming from the song or if someone was screaming in pleasure here too. "Sir, please, I have to ask you to leave." I could barely hear her over the music. When did it get so loud? I turned around and saw the same worker who thought I was staring at her. "Oh, sorry, my girlfriend is here somewhere. I need to find her." My thoughts were scattered. I probably sounded crazy to the poor girl. "You think I haven't heard this before?" She crossed her arms and looked at me with disgust. "You've been coming alone for an hour, sir. Now leave until I call security." The door I was touching began to shake, as if someone was pushing it. Or was it just me? A trembling of anxiety took over my mind. "Redhead." I tried to describe Sarah to the woman. "You heard it. Final warning, sir. Leave now." Surely if she heard the sound, she would react. But the sound was so clear, and the door was being pushed harder and harder. Something was happening behind that door, but I had no idea if Sarah was there. Everything was so loud, my thoughts were a mess, and my emotions were scattered everywhere. If I leave now, what fate can I leave for Sarah? But if I stay and force myself to enter this room, the guards will drag me out within a few minutes. I couldn't stay here any longer. My heart was beating so fast that it felt like it was about to burst out of my chest. I left the fitting room in a daze, my hands clenched into fists, my body filled with anxiety. It had been years since I last felt something like this, not since high school and all the ridicule and torment behind me. I doubled over the moment I found myself outside the store, dangerously close to throwing it all on myself. I stayed like that, slowing my breathing and trying to calm down, for who knows how long. I must have looked crazy to everyone passing by, but I was starting to feel normal again. My heart rate returned to normal and my head became clear again. Some kind of panic attack passed, and everything began to seem a little funny. "Damn, what are you doing, dude?" Callum swore at me. It shocked me and brought me back to reality, reminding me that I was standing on the ground and laughing like crazy. I stood up hastily, trying to regain my composure. "Just, passing air. It doesn't matter to you." Callum looked at me with the contempt that I had endured for years. "I'll go get my things. Your girlfriend is waiting inside to pay." Another expense that I will have to pay back later. If things continue like this, I'll probably have to work a couple of weekends. "She has an amazing body, you know," Callum said, looking at me again as he walked away. "You will definitely be happy if you ever experience this." This guy knew how to make me angry again, but I didn't react to his provocation. If you ever experience this, he not only treated her as an object, but also acted as if she belonged to him. He had always been a cocky asshole, and now it was obvious that nothing had changed in recent years. I went back inside to find Sarah waiting on the counter. The girl who kicked me out was nowhere in sight. Well, if I can just pay and leave, it won't be a problem. Although part of me wanted her to see me with Sarah as proof that I wasn't making her up. As I approached, I was able to get a good look at Sarah and her surprisingly modest outfit. Just a simple white shirt and a knee-length black skirt. She must have realized that those other outfits weren't suitable for a restaurant and chose something simple but pretty. Even though I loved seeing her in those other outfits, this one brought relief to my heart and wallet. "You look great, Sarah," I said, trying not to look panicked, and took out my wallet to pay. "Wait till you see what's underneath." She smiled, clinging to my hand as I quickly paid for her clothes. Hearing her confirmation that our evening together had not been ruined, any remaining anxiety went away. Callum didn't know what he was talking about. Sarah was my girlfriend. "I really can't wait to see," I told her, picking up the check. Sarah handed me a bag that was on the counter. I realized that I was paying not only for her current outfit, but for all the others. "Wow, this is really a lot of clothes," I stuttered, looking at the receipt. How could anything cost so much? Cal kept telling me how good I looked, so I decided to update my wardrobe, Sarah said as she left the store. I was hesitant about the whole new experiences thing, but now she was brighter and more cheerful than I had ever seen her. Of course, it was more expensive than we could afford, but Sarah's happiness was worth any price. I caught up with Sarah outside, seeing her texting on her phone. She was smiling and giggling to herself, probably laughing at her dad's stupid joke. Where to now? Finally, we had time to be together. Callum wasn't here, and we didn't even have a set time to meet again. Sarah was too busy texting to hear me, so I just waited until it was over. It took her a little while before she realized I was standing next to her. "Oh, Liam," she said, almost sounding surprised. "Can you take a picture of me?" She handed me her phone, and I was happy to capture her beauty. Sarah was usually too shy to let me take photos of her, so this simple act seemed much more intimate than it actually was. I tried to take a good photo of her, and to my surprise, Sarah even leaned forward. The position of her V neckline accentuated her bust. I took the photo and instinctively hit send, realizing too late who the image was being sent to. Sarah quickly took the phone away so I couldn't see her face, but the contact was definitely Callum. I saw a flash of the previous conversation and a few purple emojis next to his name, but that was it. "Is this for Callum?" I asked, a little shyly. "He wanted to see what I looked like before I got anything," Sarah told me. "Can I make one on my phone then?" "Maybe another time," she said. "I don't feel comfortable in these outfits yet." I felt a little pathetic when I was rejected for something as simple as a photo of my girlfriend. I knew she probably just didn't care if Callum saw her, but I was more special to her. However, from the outside, I knew it didn't look good. "Let's," Sarah said, pulling me out of my thoughts. "I need to go get ready for the evening." "Didn't we already do this?" I asked. "What else could be done?" Sarah smiled and took my hand. "A girl has a lot to do to look good," she said before walking forward again. "And Cal wants me to look good tonight." In my opinion, a girl, especially one like Sarah, doesn't have to do anything to look good. She usually doesn't wear a lot of makeup and still looks great without it. But Callum seemed to think differently. Sarah waxed herself first, starting with her eyebrows and then her entire body. I didn't understand why she needed this. Sarah shaved regularly, but waxing was supposed to reveal her more or something, according to Callum. The salon was mostly Asian women, but Callum called ahead and asked the owner to take care of Sarah. The thin Asian man was a little too relaxed while touching Sarah, but I guess that's part of their culture. He dragged Sarah into the back room for waxing, leaving me waiting at the entrance. I heard her faint moans and screams while the man actively used depilatory strips. I tried to strike up a conversation with some of the workers, asking why it was called Brazilian waxing, if they were Asian, but all I got in response was a smile. They couldn't seem to understand me, so I just waited the rest of the time in silence. When they finally finished, I paid and we left. Rushing to make it to the next meeting Callum had arranged for her. She texted him constantly as we walked around the city, coordinating what she needed to do next. It seemed like the guy was becoming a part of our relationship even when he wasn't there, but Sarah was really enjoying how she made herself feel. Our next stop was the hairdresser to cut and style her hair. Then a pedicure and her nails were done, again all paid for by me. At this rate, I probably would have asked my parents for a loan to cover the rent, but it was all worth it to see Sarah's smile and joy as the day progressed. I've never felt so sexy before, Sarah said as we headed to her makeup area. It seems like every guy that passes by wants to get me into bed, and I don't even show much skin. She exuded the confidence and energy that I always wanted to see in her. I'm sorry she needs so much makeup to reveal it, but maybe Callum was right. I wasn't sure about this whole doing it Callum's way experiment, I admitted. But it seems to really be working for you. I held her hand and pulled her close to me. Having hugged her, I approached her for a kiss. But before I could get any closer, I heard the sound of a man walking by and slapping her on the ass. "Nice ass, girl," said a balding man old enough to be her father. "Thank you," Sarah called to him, turning the corner, clearly not understanding the situation. "Sarah, you can't just thank a guy for what he did," I said, a little taken aback. Sarah thought for a moment and then ran after him. "This guy," she said. "Wait." She really has a new level of confidence. I've never seen her confront someone like that. "Do you think my ass is beautiful?" she told him. Yeah," the man paused, clearly confused. "What about my breasts?" she said, adding aggression to her voice and raising her chest. "Of course, I love big, beautiful breasts. Come on, squeeze them quickly before you decide." "Wait, what?" "Wait, what?" I said, puzzled. "This guy was nice enough to compliment me," she said, looking at me as the man aggressively hit on her. "He deserves an award for this." "Get away from her, man," I shouted to the guy, furious with the situation. "Hey, don't look at me, man," he said, smiling, and that damn smile reminded me of Callum. I walked up to the guy, not knowing what to do, when Sarah abruptly stopped me. "Liam, what are you doing?" she said, as if I was being irrational. "That guy was just attacking you in public." "Because I told him." "Why?" We didn't scream, but it was the closest thing to screaming we'd ever had. Even on this busy street, the air seemed still with tension. "It's just," Sarah began, looking down at the ground. "I like being wanted." "Am I?" "Of course you do, but you're just one guy, Liam." She looked at me again, her confidence returning. "For so long, I thought my body was something to be ashamed of, but now it's something guys desire." I know." I took her hands in mine. "I'm so happy that you're gaining confidence, but is it necessary through strangers talking about and touching your body? It works for now, and it doesn't mean anything." She looked deep into my eyes, and I felt the sincerity of her words. "I know our first time together doesn't compare to what a guy like him or Callum can do to me, so you don't have to worry about it." "You're right, I know. It's just hard to see some guy touching you when we weren't even close before. You like to see me happy, right? When guys touch me, I feel wanted and happy, so you should be happy too." I couldn't fully understand her logic, but it was hard to argue with the results. Sarah was more confident, which made me happy. I was uncomfortable this evening, but if it boosts our confidence going forward, it might be worth it. "Okay," I said, and I could see how happy that made Sarah. "So do you mind if guys compliment me or touch me?" she said with a wide smile. I think not, if it's fast." "Great," she exclaimed, pulling me by the hand along the street. "Let's go put on our makeup and head out." By this time, it was already dark, and I was hungry. I didn't want to look at the bill, but I was happy to eat. Okay, let's go, I said, trying to keep up with Sarah. But where will we eat? You'll see, Sarah replied, still with that big smile. Callum knows the coolest place. By the time Sarah finished her makeup, it was really late. My stomach was aching, but I couldn't tell if it was because I was hungry or because I was thinking about that guy touching Sarah. I couldn't get the image of his hands on her breasts out of my head the whole time I was waiting for her. It pissed me off, but at the same time, in some weird, twisted way, it made me feel good. I wasn't sure what this feeling was, which only made the knot in my stomach worse. Perhaps I was just glad she was happy, or maybe there was some weird confirmation that other guys wanted to touch my girlfriend. Is this what Sarah feels? The reason she wants more compliments and touching? More guys touching her? Just thinking about it increased the tension I felt. If I continued, my body would start to shake, and I wasn't sure if it would be in a good way or a bad way. I wasn't entirely sure, but exploring these feelings was clearly something Sarah wanted to do. And even though things got out of hand earlier with Callum seeing her naked, I'll make sure we take it slow. Come on, let go, Sarah said, pushing me out the door. I didn't even notice she finished, and seeing her now, I barely recognized her. Her hair, eyelashes, and eyebrows were styled like never before. The makeup was a little over the top, but it highlighted her face in a way it never had before and turned me on. She was always attractive, beautiful, and divine when I looked at her, but now it was different. It was more carnal and raw, as if a deep desire was bubbling within. I didn't want to think of her like that, but there was no polite way to say it. She looked like a girl of easy virtue. Just like the popular girls we used to tease during recess, she was dressed up like a prostitute. Bright red lips, dark contrasting eyeshadow, and layers of foundation, so thick it was obvious even to me. Her clothes were still simple, at least they were eye-catching, but not more than I could handle. We raced through the streets, heading to an area of the city that I had never been to before. It was more fashionable than what we were used to, but looking like her, Sarah almost fit in. She could be as dressed up as the girls here, but she had enough self-respect not to dress provocatively like them. Walking these streets, Sarah attracted far less attention than she had all day. The guys seemed to have better targets for their untamable libidos and mostly ignored us. I could see that Sarah was upset about this, and to be honest, I was too. Here in front of them was a true divine goddess, but they only cared about who showed the most skin. It's getting hot, don't you think? Sarah asked me. This seemed quite pleasant to me, but before I could answer, Sarah began to take off her outerwear. She slowly lifted it, as if teasing every guy in sight, revealing more and more of her bare skin. She lifted it higher, and I realized she didn't have a bodice. For a moment, I thought she was showing her nakedness to everyone on the street, but then I noticed. Underneath her shirt was another, smaller outer garment. The tight tights hugged her body, the black mesh material completely see-through. My heart almost flew out of my chest when she started to turn and look at me. After such a long time, I finally saw her breasts completely. She was so beautiful without a bodice, so soft, full, and amazingly elastic. It was too much to take in. Wow, was all I could imagine looking at her. The nearby crowds filled the bars and streets cheered her, the boys' eyes burning her image into their memory. I knew you'd like it, she said as she pirouetted and posed for the crowd. She continued to strut down the street, looking much more confident now that she had every guy's attention. I could feel the envy coming off of them as we walked side by side, and it made me feel good. Sarah was actually right about the whole thing, although the chest stickers might have been a little overdone. "Call!" she screamed, running up to hug him. He was standing at the door of some club, talking to the navigator in front of an unexpectedly long line. I didn't understand why anyone would even go to a nightclub, let alone wait in line. "Hey, Callum," I said, walking closer. He finally got dressed, wearing a stylish shirt and skinny jeans. The material highlighted how toned he was, contrasting with Sarah's softer body still pressed against his side. "Where is the restaurant? I'm hungry and I want to get away from this noise." Even outside the club, I could feel the bass vibrating through me as the music blared inside. "We're already here. This is my cousin's new place." Callum chuckled and turned back to the navigator, saying something that I couldn't see. "Are we eating at the club?" I asked, puzzled. "No, stupid, we're going to drink and dance," Sarah told me joyfully. "How about we grab a bite to eat and talk about this first?" I really didn't want to spend the night here, especially after having a panic attack earlier due to loud music in the store. "What, are you wearing this?" Sarah said, pointing to her top. I was too caught up in her gaze to really think about it. In any case, the place wouldn't miss her with a top like that. But she still had another top and bags of clothes to change into. "Come on, this will be fun," Callum said before I could say anything, ushering Sarah inside the building. I really had no choice but to follow them. Callum seemed to awaken something in Sarah, and while that gave her confidence now, who knows what he'd do if they were alone. "My cousin lets me and my friends skip the lines and get in for free, but we still have to buy drinks," Callum said, raising his voice above the increasing pounding of the music. "Why don't you go buy us a drink each, Liam? I'll help Sarah finish her outfit in the bathroom." "I think she looks great as is," I told them, raising my voice so that I could be heard above the loud bass. We entered the club into what was supposed to be the lounge and bar area. Bright neon lights and smoke shrouded the entire area in a bright fog. It was so noisy, both the music and the visuals. Even though it was relatively early in the night, the dance floor in front of us was packed. Men and women in various states of undress rubbed against each other without a care in the world. "I can't dance in this skirt, Liam," Sarah shouted over the music. She was no longer holding on to Callum, but she was still standing next to him. "We'll just be there for a minute, okay? So make sure our drinks are ready." "Rum and Coke for me. Give the girl a Long Island iced tea," Callum said, his booming voice easily cutting through the music as they walked away together. I was still nervous about leaving them alone, but I was beginning to realize that it was an irrational fear. Everyone here was dressed quite similarly to Sarah, and they were all informally touching each other. Maybe Callum or some other guy would try to feel her breasts or butt, but at this point it wasn't a big deal. I ordered their drinks from the bartender, without ordering anything for myself despite my rumbling stomach. The prices here were simply too high to justify it, especially after the day we'd already had. I waited there alone as one song faded into the next, the anxiety building inside me again with each passing time. I don't know why I felt this way when I trusted Sarah completely, but just the thought of Callum's hands on her when I wasn't there made my chest tighten. Finally, I saw them coming through the crowd and saw Sarah's full outfit. Complementing her mesh shirt were long mesh tights that reached to her waist, the wide rips giving full view of the black thong she wore. The tanga was so small that I wasn't sure if she could see if she was wearing it from the front or the side, but at least the front was covered. Seeing the full outfit, Sarah was definitely the most provocatively dressed girl in the club. The gap between what she wore and what the average girl wore wasn't big, but she definitely stood out. As they pushed through the crowd, a few brave guys took the instructions on her chest seriously, slapping her bare ass as she walked past them. Sarah just laughed, but the attention had no effect on my nerves. Sarah ran over and kissed me when they were close, surprising me with her public display of affection. The kiss was not light and loving, as usual, but passionate and wild. Was the taste of her lips different, almost bitter, or salty? I was confused until I remembered that she had put on makeup. It was probably just the taste of the lipstick. She had never worn it for me to know before. "Everyone here is amazing. I saw those guys," Sarah shouted, drinking her drink as if she was dying of thirst. "One more mug," Callum said to the bartender, taking his drink with a smirk. "Let's have a drink in the booth before we hit the dance floor." "It's amazing to be so desired," Sarah said as we waited to get our next drink. Did she seem a little different? Her eyes were wider than usual, and she glowed with more energy than usual. The atmosphere of the place was clearly affecting her, even if I still couldn't feel it. "I'm glad you had a good evening, but maybe try not to let the guys touch you too much. They might misunderstand. She moved her arms back and forth, dancing in place to the music, nodding her head. She almost seemed lost in the music, but quickly returned to grab her drink when it was ready. Callum chose a booth that was hidden in the corner. It was further away from the others, but it turned out to be the quietest place in the club. I sat down first, glad to finally have a place to put Sarah's bags. Sarah chose to sit next to Callum, which hurt me, but I tried not to overthink it. "So what do you think of this place?" Callum asked, one hand holding his drink and the other resting on his leg under the table. "Everyone here is so friendly. I like the atmosphere," Sarah said, taking another long sip of her drink. She was almost finished with the glass when she suddenly shuddered, spitting the drink all over me and the table. "Are you okay, Sarah?" I asked, drying myself. "Just, swallowed wrong." She still looked tense. The drink must have gotten stuck in her throat. "We need to teach her to swallow, right, Liam?" Callum laughed. Yeah, ha." The joke wasn't funny at all, but I laughed politely. "Are you sure she's okay?" "And never be better," she stammered her words, leaning against Callum for support. "What about you, Liam? What do you think?" Callum asked, looking into my eyes. "I don't have anything to compare it to, but it looks great," I said. "It's a little too loud for me, but I think I understand now why you like it." We continued talking about the club and his cousin. Callum kept looking at me. He let me speak and didn't even try to put me down. Maybe we could at least be civil with each other. Sarah, for her part, clearly drank too quickly. She could not stand still. Her head was most often lowered to the table. She looked so stunned that I walked back to the bar to get her a glass of water. I returned as quickly as possible, but she had disappeared from the office. "Where did she go?" I asked Callum as I sat back down. For a guy who acts like a beast at a party, he already looked pretty tired. With the way he threw his head back and how my voice surprised him, it seemed like he almost fell asleep. "MGGGHHH bathroom," he growled. "Right? Is she okay?" "I think she drank too much." "She can, do a lot better than you think." Callum was acting strange, constantly moving back and forth in his seat and sounding like he was about to explode. Are, are you okay? Did these drinks give you stomach problems?" "Ooh, I'm fine." His breathing was getting heavier. "Suo good." He clearly wasn't okay, but apparently couldn't break his masculine facade by showing it. If he behaves like this, then how bad can Sarah be? I wanted to go and check on her, but was that being overprotective? Perhaps I should just wait for her to return. "Slow now," Callum groaned. Was he talking to me? He didn't look at me, but there was no one else here. He noticed that I wanted to run after Sarah. Was he telling me to give her space? He was probably right. I should quickly go and take care of her when she clearly wanted to be more independent all day. We are no longer schoolchildren. We are adults. If I can't treat Sarah like an adult and let her take care of herself, does that mean I really respect her? "Thanks, friend, you're right," I said. "I know we didn't have everything perfect today, but I really appreciate your advice." Callum now had both hands under the table, perhaps adjusting his pants. It was a little funny that he was still pretending to be okay, but after he treated me so well, I decided to play together. "So what are you doing for fun now?" I asked, trying to start a conversation. It might not have been the best decision to make him talk like that, but I couldn't sit here in silence waiting for Sarah to come back. "MHHH, focus on the balls," he said with a deep groan. "Sport?" I suggested. It was difficult to understand when his discomfort caused him to speak strangely. "Never really got into them." "Ooh, oh yeah," he drawled. "Nothing like giving them a good whack." "I can imagine." "MGGHH, you can't, man. You haven't even experienced it." "Yet, you're right. You probably have hundreds of rounds." "Deeper, deeper," he moaned softly. "More than hundreds? Ha, you must be addicted or something." It felt weird having such a casual conversation with Callum. For so long, he was this dark figure in my head, but now we get along. I understood more and more why Sarah wanted to try it. It truly was a cathartic experience. Yes, ugh, just like that, he said, swaying. The pain must have reached its peak because he moved so hard that the entire table began to shake. I heard a strange sound as the table shook. Not the creak I would have expected. It sounded like a wet pop that I could only make out over the music. You, I started, but then I noticed that Callum was clearly feeling too much to say any further. I'm going to give Sarah a quick call to make sure she's okay. That was enough of a show of caring, right? I didn't want to choke her, but seeing how Callum was reacting, I needed to do something to make sure she was okay. I turned my head and dialed Sarah's number, waiting for her to answer. A little HHH, haha, HH, hey, Lewis, she said in a husky voice. Hey, Sarah, I just wanted to make sure you weren't feeling too bad. How is your stomach? She sounded better than Callum, but she was clearly struggling with something. With the music, Callum's moans, and how quietly she spoke, it was a little hard to make out the words. They sounded rather unclear, probably due to the amount of drinking. That's good, I said. I wanted to tell her not to drink so much so quickly or ask her if she needed help, but I didn't. As Callum said, I decided to take my time and give her more space. It came faintly through the phone. It was even harder to hear when Callum started growling at the same time. He growled harder and louder than before. Ah, damn, he shouted. I looked back and saw his body tense in time with his roars. I didn't want to think about what he was going through right now, so I turned away again. Ah, that was too much, Sarah muttered to herself. Are you feeling better now? I asked. HM? Oh, Liam. Yes, much better, she replied, a little embarrassed. Apparently, she was embarrassed that I could hear her experiencing discomfort. Glad to hear, see you soon then. Yes, I need to clean up a bit. She hung up before I could tell her I loved her, hoping she would feel better now. Callum certainly looked better after what he had just been through. He seemed much calmer, almost content, looking at something under the table. He took his almost empty drink from the table and raised it for a sip. Instead of making contact with his mouth, he simply spilled it onto the floor. Oh shit, he said without much concern. My pants are wet now. Are you sure? I asked. It looks like it dripped on the floor. You think I don't know if my pants are wet? He said. Come on, dude, give me your shirt. What? For what? I got along better with Callum, but I wasn't about to just give him the shirt off my back. I need something to clean this off. I can't use my shirt, it's too good for that. And we can't use Sarah's clothes, right? There was something about the way Callum's mind worked that was so different from mine. He always seemed to come to conclusions that were wildly different from mine. Can I just go up to the bartenders and ask for some napkins or towels? I don't know why I phrased it as a question, I just knew they'd have something else we could use. No, dude, they'll kick us out if they think I'm so drunk I spill my drinks. Just take it off already. I wasn't entirely convinced, but he knew more about these places than I did. I took my shirt off, grateful that the lighting kept anyone from getting a good look at me. I wasn't ashamed of my body, but years of bullying had left me insecure about being shirtless in front of other people. Callum took my shirt and started drying himself with it under the table. I awkwardly waited for him to finish, cleaning up my mess. For a second, I thought I heard Sarah laughing, but when I looked back, she was nowhere to be seen. Yeah, good now, Callum said, tossing the shirt back to me. I hurried to cover myself, noticing that something was wrong only when the shirt was completely on me. Ugh, why is it so sticky now? Obviously because it's covered in my drink, Callum said, smiling widely. Damn, you didn't look like you spilled that much. The front of my shirt seemed to be stuck to me, which meant it was very wet. I'll go get something to wash myself with, I said. Keep an eye on Sarah, she'll be back soon. Don't worry, I heard Callum say as I started to walk away. She'll be back soon. I came back a few minutes later after drying myself off. Glad to see Sarah was back at the table, sitting next to Callum. Her face looked a little damp or wet, but otherwise she was fine. She probably just washed her face before coming out of the bathroom. Glad to see you looking good. I told her, sitting down at the buffet. Feeling better yet? I'm not quite satisfied yet, she said, but I think a little time on the dance floor will change that. I didn't see how shaking and moving would help settle her stomach, but I knew better than to question Sarah's logic after she'd had a few drinks. She clearly just wanted to dance and have her way, even if it wasn't the best idea. The music and lights were still a bit too much for me, but I didn't want to sit on the sidelines while Sarah and Callum had fun. That sounds like a great. Come on, Cal, Sarah said, pulling him by the arms towards the dance floor. I think I'm actually ready to dance, I said a little louder, trying to prove my point. Sarah probably just assumed I didn't want to, which is why she asked Callum first. I didn't want her to think I didn't want to do fun things with her. She needed to know I wouldn't stop her from being who she wanted to be. Oh, you, Liam? I thought you were going to watch our bags, she said. I think dancing together would be a great way to celebrate our time together. It was a little surreal remembering what this night was all about. But if this is where we find ourselves now, I'd make sure Sarah knows I have her full support. You know I would love to dance with you, she said with a sympathetic look. But I already promised Cal. Don't worry, baby, he said, looking at both of us. I'll take the bags to the private room upstairs. Why don't you go have some fun while I get some rest? He must not have recovered as quickly as Sarah. It felt pretty good to be the one to go out and have fun while Callum was drunk. Sarah looked a little sullen when she heard that Callum wouldn't be joining, but she shrugged her shoulders and stood up. Okay, Liam, let's go hang out, she said, waving her arms and jiggling her breasts as she walked towards the dance floor. I stood up to follow her, but Callum stopped me. Wait a second, he said. You've never danced before, have you? He was right, and as this realization dawned on me, I began to feel quite nervous. Sarah probably didn't care if I looked stupid or dancing weird, but I still felt the judgmental looks of those around me. Yeah, I thought so, Callum chuckled, reading my face like a book. Listen, go to the bar and order Callum's special, they'll recognize it. One of these, and you'll have enough liquid courage to get through the night. I didn't like the idea of relying on anything to have a good time. Normally, Sarah and I didn't need any of that to enjoy our time together. But Sarah was already dancing, shaking, I had no time to doubt. I nodded and smiled at Callum, heading towards the bar. I might be starting to like this guy. He'd been oddly nice and helpful since we'd arrived. Maybe I'd finally gotten over my preconceptions about him. Maybe he'd really changed. Can I, have Callum's special? I asked the bartender. She looked at me questioningly, and for a moment I thought it was one of Callum's old jokes. She glanced back at Callum, who was still sitting there, as if waiting for confirmation, and then went into the back room. She returned with a finished drink, handed it to me with a wink, and said, "No charge, have a nice evening." Being related to the owner seemed to have its advantages. I downed the drink as quickly as I could, almost choking on the bitter taste. I shook myself and walked out onto the dance floor, letting the music wash over me, trying to relax and go with the flow. I noticed Sarah dancing with some guy to the beat of the music, drowning out all other sensations. Their dancing was a little too intense for me, and I felt that this guy was definitely not someone I wanted to be with. Feeling unexpectedly confident, I walked over and gently but firmly pulled Sarah aside. The guy gave me a disapproving look, but I simply met his gaze calmly. Maybe it was the drink, but I felt like I could handle any situation. He stepped back, and I took his place next to Sarah. We began to dance, and she didn't even seem to notice the change of partners at first. The music took over us, and for a moment the whole world disappeared, leaving only the bright lights, the beat, and her smile. Everything felt right in that moment, and I finally understood why people loved moments like this. Sarah was there, and it was the best feeling I had ever had. We continued to dance in the same vein, to one song after another. Every once in a while, a guy would come up and slap Sarah on the ass or try to pull her away from him, but I was more confident than ever. I didn't strangle her or disturb Sarah, but I gave her a taste of the wonderful life we were going to lead together. A few hours ago, I scolded Callum for ruining this night for us, and now I wanted to thank him. He may have touched and looked at her breasts before me, but he opened our minds to this new and incredible experience. Our bodies moved by instinct and emotion, moving as one, embracing each other in passion. I was on top of the world, and there was no other way but up. Hey, love doves, Callum's voice came through the music. Poop, baby, Sarah pulled away from me and threw her arms at him. He casually ran his hands over her legs and buttocks, but that was normal. He wasn't as aggressive as that other bastard. Guys, this is all cool, but the VIP area is in the basement. I was starting to feel a little dizzy as I walked out of this moment with Sarah. The loud music was ringing in my ears, but I tried to listen to Callum as best I could. Why don't we go somewhere more private and have fun? Callum suggested, taking Sarah's hand and leading her away. My body felt so light, but moving felt like I was underwater, fully clothed. My brain felt like it was behind frosted glass, or like everything I was seeing was on TV. Was I drunk? Was that how I felt? It had been fun before, holding Sarah in my arms, but now that Callum was carrying her away, it felt wrong. I followed them, watching as they patted my hand as Sarah passed. It was normal, right? My mind was a little foggy, but I clearly remembered that this was normal. Sarah giggled and smiled at every clap or handshake that touched her bum, so everything must be fine. The stairs down to the VIP area were dark, lit only by dim red lights under each step. I had to hug the handrail as I went down, each step feeling like a 10-foot drop. Callum opened the door at the bottom and led us inside, turning towards the bright light that momentarily blinded me. It didn't look like a VIP area, more like a staff lounge. Opposite a pair of black leather sofas arranged around a coffee table was a small kitchen area. The room was small and in no way styled to match the rest of the club, and the weirdest thing was that there were already other people in there. I thought we were supposed to have privacy. This is a secluded place, Callum smiled, holding Sarah's hand tightly and gesturing towards the people sitting in the lounge area. Meet my good friends Stephen, Lacey, and her brother Daniel. Stephen looked just like Callum, with a similar style of dress and build. The main difference was their hair. Callum had short dark hair, while Stephen had grown it long and blonde. Lacey and Daniel were both black and dressed more outrageously than the other guys. Daniel had his shirt half unbuttoned, showing off his incredibly toned chest. Lacey also wore tight pants that hugged her legs perfectly. Her tiny top was buttoned up with one button, hiding her attractive breasts. The way it was cut showed a slight hint of underbust, meaning she probably wasn't wearing a bra. She wasn't as beautiful as my Sarah, but she was definitely a close second. You come with the most interesting guys, Cal, baby, Lacey said, biting her lips and looking at us. It's nice that it comes with instructions, Daniel laughed. Sarah and her boyfriend Liam wanted to have a little fun, Callum explained. Like the parties we used to have in high school. Stephen stood up and took Sarah's hand, kissing it like a lord greeting his lady. I wouldn't mind playing our old party games with a beauty like you. Ooh, what games did you play? Sarah asked enthusiastically. Truth or Dare, Strap Poker, our own modified version of Twister. Stephen took Sarah from Callum and pulled her into his chest, one hand firmly gripping her bum. Watching him hold her while she looked into his eyes, I felt a rush of heat. Was this room hotter than the club, or was the heat I felt another sign that I was drunk? A round of shots before we decide, Callum announced, pulling out shotguns and a bottle of something I couldn't quite make out. He poured and handed one to Lacey and Daniel, who downed them immediately, then offered one to me. I declined and stayed leaning against the wall. One drink was enough. I didn't want to fall over and leave Sarah alone with these guys. Callum passed the glass to Sarah, but stopped her before she could drink it. If you want to have a real party, you should do it the fun way, he told her. Fun? Where's the fun? She asked. Callum took the glass from her and drank it himself. Then, without warning, he grabbed her and started kissing her passionately. It felt unreal. My mind couldn't comprehend what I was seeing. Sarah was making out with Callum right in front of me, while his rude friends cheered them on. "The hello," I growled, gasping, lifting myself off the wall. I wanted to go up and separate them, but I couldn't find support. I almost fell to the floor, but Stephen caught me, holding me down while his friend continued to make out with my girlfriend. "Relax, dude, it's no big deal," Callum said. "We've all done things like that with each other's partners." All eyes were on me as his friends nodded in confirmation. "I just let the drink flow from my mouth to hers, nothing more," he explained innocently. "Let's get you some water, Liam. You don't look so good." Sarah pulled me away from Stephen and led me to the sink. She poured me some water, speaking softly into my ear. "You love me, don't you?" she asked. "Always," I replied, splashing water on my face to cool myself. "And I love you." The words were so sweet in my mind. Just the sound of them made my skin tingle and my heart beat even faster. "That will never change," she continued. "So don't be jealous if I flirt a little, like we agreed." My mind was still foggy, but I was pretty sure I didn't agree with her going that far. "But he kissed you." "Just for fun," he said. "You know it doesn't mean anything." She looked at the others, a small, sly smile appearing on her face. Besides, she slowly ran her hand down my pants, resting it on top of my underwear. "I know you like it." She whispered soft words in my ear, and I felt the tension in my body change to something else. Her palm slid lightly down my back, creating a feeling of warmth and trust. "Say, Chach, it's okay." Her voice was soothing, almost lulling. We were close, but something new slipped between us right now, subtle but meaningful. I felt like I could trust her completely, despite all the uncertainty of the moment. I nodded back, too stunned to speak. "So you trust me not to do anything you don't like?" I nodded again. She smiled, pulled her hand out of my pants, and kissed me on the cheek. "That's why I love you," she said. "You always let me do what I need to do to feel fulfilled." Sarah pulled me away from her skin and led us back to the group. It was a side of her that I had never seen before, and although it partially scared me, I couldn't deny how attracted I was to her. My mind was still in a fog, but my body knew what it wanted. I just hoped that our new feelings wouldn't overwhelm our understanding before the night was over. "Those party games?" asked Sarah. "Is there a way to make them more fun?" "I like her," Lacey said, looking at my girlfriend. She leaned against Daniel, showing off the tempting size of her underboob. Sarah led us to the couch, and it took all my willpower not to look at them, but even one quick glance was enough to get me excited. "Let's start with a classic truth or dare," Callum announced, sitting down at the other end of the couch. I watched as he casually placed his hand on Sarah, pulling her towards him, just like Lacey did with Daniel. "And to make it even more fun," Stephen said, lying on the other couch, "any wrong question or any missed call will result in a forfeit." "What's the forfeit?" I asked. "The group will decide," Daniel told me, his eyes never leaving Sarah. "Since you suggested it sexually, you can go first. Truth or dare?" "I don't want to seem boring in front of you," Sarah said happily. "Let's challenge me." "Ishikum," Daniel scratched his chin, his eyes studying Sarah. "Why don't we start by you kissing everyone here?" "That's it? Don't make fun of me because I'm new." Sarah laughed, giving me a quick kiss on the cheek, then stood up and climbed into Callum's lap. She kissed him on her lap for about 30 seconds, then pulled away and walked over to Stephen. She leaned down to kiss him, giving us a glimpse of her ass pressing into the fishnet stockings she was wearing. Only a tiny thong covered her, and she was almost completely visible to these near strangers. While she was kissing Stephen, I looked over to see that every eye in the room was glued to her ass. My arousal was not waning, and watching these men and women adore my girlfriend's ass was a thrill I had never experienced before. It still made me feel insecure and anxious, but knowing that the girl they were all after was mine made me shiver. Much to the dismay of those around her, Sarah finished with Stephen and sat on Daniel's lap. She lingered with him longer, perhaps because it was his dare, or because she liked his touch. Finally finished with him, she stood up laughing and started to walk back, but was stopped by Lacey. "Wait, honey," he said, "kiss everyone," Lacey said, and started making out with her while the guys cheered them on. Any doubts I had about the whole thing vanished as I watched the pair. My mind was still buzzing as I watched the two beautiful women embrace each other. The boys howled as they broke the kiss, but their complaints quickly died down so the game could continue. "Truth or dare, Lacey?" Sarah asked, licking her lips. "Let's be honest, I like to start slow," she replied. Sarah frowned, clearly disappointed with her choice, but perked up when she asked her question. "How many guys have you slept with here?" she asked, her eyes lustful. "And how many times?" "In front of everyone but you two," she said calmly. "I don't even know how many times." I couldn't believe how calmly she could talk about it. She didn't seem remotely embarrassed by such an intimate question. A few more rounds of questions went by, each asking which girl they'd slept with or how many times they'd done this or that. I was glad they weren't asking me, but hearing how many they'd done made me feel inadequate. Worse, I realized they all already knew this information and were only asking each other so that both Sarah and I would hear it. "Truth or dare, Sarah?" Stephen asked. "A dare," Sarah said, insistent. After a few missed turns, she was clearly eager to prove herself to these guys. Stephen said nothing, but he smiled. He stood up, walked over to the table where his wallet was, and began rummaging through it, pulling out a piece of elastic. "I dare you," he said, throwing it into Colina's hand. "Take it off, Call, without using your hands." "What? Is it that easy?" "Too easy," Sarah said. "We're not done yet," Callum said cheekily lowering his pants. I expected him to simply add this element on top of the blue canvas, something playful but within reason. But his confidence and ease surprised me. He clearly had no qualms about exposing himself. "You don't mind?" Sarah asked, her voice shaking with a mixture of curiosity and admiration. I reminded myself that this was just a game, just an experiment, and not necessarily anything more. I nodded slightly, indicating that it was okay, even though my insides were clenched with uncertainty. Sarah lowered herself, her gaze fixed on him. The air was tense, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. She smiled slightly, as if assessing the situation, and said with a hint of playfulness, "Well, let's try it." Her movements were a little awkward, perhaps due to the wine she had drunk, but the atmosphere remained light and relaxed. We all understood that this was part of the overall experiment, nothing more and nothing less. I looked away, giving them space, but the feeling of electricity in the air did not disappear. "And maybe try a new tactic." My heart beat faster as I watched this scene. Despite an inner voice telling me to intervene, I couldn't look away. "Good idea, Liam," she said with a slight smile, turning to me. There was something playful in her eyes, something that made me freeze in place. She changed her posture, contemplating her next move, while everyone around her could hear cheers. The atmosphere seemed electrifying. Everyone in the room was waiting for something to continue, but no one dared to disturb the moment. I felt a strange mixture of emotions growing inside me, from confusion to inexplicable interest. She continued to move with a confidence that seemed to attract the gaze of everyone present. "It's getting harder," she chuckled, brushing her hair out of her face and looking back at us. There was a note of challenge in her voice. Callum muttered something in response, his voice choked but clearly pleased. I felt that the situation was beyond the scope of a normal game, and yet no one made an attempt to change anything. Meeting my gaze again, she smiled slightly, then turned her attention back to Callum. It seemed that some kind of silent dialogue began between them, to which the others did not have access. I took a deep breath, trying to figure out what to do next. Just a game, I told myself. Just a game. When she was satisfied with her sloppy work, she quickly glanced at me. It was only for a moment, but something in my expression must have given her the confidence to take the next step. She smiled at him, her gaze full of confidence and slight playfulness. The atmosphere in the room was heating up with every second, and the silence was broken only by echoes of conversations and muffled laughter in the background. When she turned to me and sat down next to me, Her eyes sparkled with coquetry. Her touch on my shoulder was light but intentional, and her smile was promising. "Well, did I manage?" she asked, her voice low and slightly hoarse. His thoughts were confused, his emotions were boiling somewhere in his chest, unable to find a way out. I couldn't find the words, so I just nodded, trying to collect my thoughts. She seemed to read my confusion, and her fingers gently slid over my hand, leaving behind a pleasant warmth. The moment seemed like an eternity, and the whole world around her seemed to dissolve in her gaze and in this short touch. "It's okay," she whispered before pulling away with a small smile. There was tension in the air, but it was not heavy, but rather exciting, filled with foreboding and something elusive that hovered between us. She stood up and, casting one last meaningful glance at me, disappeared into the crowd. I ran my hand over my face, trying to come to my senses and realize what had just happened. But this moment, no doubt, will remain in my memory for a long time. Yes, I think I did. "Let's continue the game, guys," Lacey said, interrupting our conversation. "Yeah, you haven't had a turn yet, have you, Liam?" Callum said, looking down at me with a smirk that made me feel uncomfortable. "Truth or dare?" "True," I replied, trying to keep my voice from shaking. My thoughts were still wandering somewhere far away, and I needed a little time to collect myself. The choice was more cautious than bold, but I hoped that a simple question would allow me to catch my breath. "HM." Callum leaned back in his chair, putting his hands behind his head. His confidence and mocking gaze created an atmosphere of relaxed but palpable tension. There was a short pause in the room, and I braced myself for his question, knowing it could be anything from funny to extremely awkward. Still, I was ready for it, or so I told myself. "Here's the question," Lacey intervened. "Between you and Cal, who's the bigger man?" Her look and the bite of her lips made it clear what she was talking about, and I began to regret my choice. I wasn't ashamed of my size, at least until today. I was a completely average person, but it still hurt to realize that Callum's masculinity was greater than mine. "See, Callum is bigger," I said, looking at the floor. I heard Callum chuckle and didn't want to see his smug face while I admitted it. "It's okay, baby." Sarah kissed my cheek, still blushing from the drink I had drunk earlier. "I know I will love your little man just as much." Why did she have to call it that? I understood the meaning, but at that moment it sounded like she was calling it small. And wait a second, what did she mean by as much? Before my mind could dwell on the question, Callum was interrupted by his thoughts. "I'm glad you wanted to share this, Liam. Are you ready to tell the truth now?" His face shone with merriment. "Wait, isn't that my? You fell for the oldest trick in the book, little man. Daniel told me it wasn't Lacey's turn to tell you the truth. She just asked you a question." It took me a while for the gears in my head to start turning as I realized what had happened. I couldn't believe I fell for such a simple thing. My mind wasn't working the way it usually does. The group had a good laugh, and I tried to laugh with them. I didn't want them to think I was a bad athlete, so I took the hazing as a sign that we were getting closer. "Okay, then here's your real question." As he made this announcement, Callum raised his hands to calm the others. "In great detail, how good it feels to have sex with Sarah." My heart skipped a beat. I physically felt the gaze of everyone pressing me from all sides. The crushing weight of the realization of what I would have to confess settled deep within me. Sweat beaded on my forehead. I wanted to look at the floor again, but I gathered enough strength to look at Sarah. She smiled her beautiful smile. It helped lift my spirits and made me remember that there is nothing to be ashamed of. Yes, we didn't do anything else, but only because we were waiting for the perfect night. The night that was supposed to come today, but will still come very soon. My voice wavered, and it took me a moment to gather my strength. "I don't really know." The three newcomers burst into a loud mixture of shock and laughter. I couldn't help but feel humiliated, even knowing that waiting for a girl like Sarah was the right thing to do. What really confused my boyfriend was Callum's face. There was no shock or laughter, just the same level of amusement he had before he asked. He couldn't know, could he? Is that why he asked this question in the first place? He must have figured it out somehow. There was simply no other way to know that Sarah and I were virgins. Calm down, guys. Liam is not like the rest of you. Sarah scolded the others as she hugged me. He's not a sex-crazed party boy. He's a gentle soul. I don't care how modest your boyfriend is, buddy, Stephen said with a laugh. How can you not appreciate a girl like her every night? He knows when the time is right, Sarah replied, her voice sounding confident, although I would have preferred it if she hadn't interfered. And even if it's none of your business, we'll figure it out ourselves when the right moment comes. She probably thought she was protecting me, but she didn't seem to realize the effect her words had on others. The guy's looks became noticeably more interesting, and Daniel shifted awkwardly from one foot to the other. Yeah, I'm sure it will, but let's get one thing straight first, Callum said, leaning forward. His gaze was the most piercing of all. But I answered the question, I objected, not knowing where to look. My gaze darted between the floor and the guys' faces. I told the truth, isn't that enough? The question was about something more specific, Callum replied with a grin. And you gave too vague an answer, which is difficult to consider honest. There was a tense silence in the air, and I felt a chill run down my spine. The others nodded and muttered agreement, even Sarah nodded, and then gave me an apologetic look. Since you haven't told us how nice it is, it's only right that we know about it. He smiled widely, and the bulge in his pants twitched in anticipation. Either you come there right now, and you can tell us, or you let us all feel her. No. Even though I was still dizzy, there was no way I was going to let that happen. No, guys, we are not going to have sex in front of you, and you absolutely are not going to do it. Just the thought of either of them having sex with Sarah made my heart race, and I wasn't going to give in to their stupid game and ruin the perfect evening we had planned. How could you think that I would allow? Calm down, baby. No need to get hysterical. Callum interrupted me with smug condescension. Nobody said anything about having sex with your girlfriend. Sarah stood behind me and began to rub my back, as she always did to help me calm down. I didn't even realize it, but now I was standing with my fingers digging into my palms. You said, SHHH, everything is fine. Sarah whispered in my ear in a pleasant, quiet voice. Nothing will happen that you don't like. Now let's just listen to him, okay, Liam? It's a little embarrassing to admit the effect her touch and voice had on me. Even despite my outrage, I still couldn't help but get aroused. I wasn't usually that easily angered, but all the teasing tonight must have kept me on my toes. I relaxed my hand and tried to control my breathing. Callum took this as a sign that he should continue. Caress a little. He waved them in front of me as if mocking me. Grind a little and 2 minutes to reveal itself. Either you muster up the courage, or each of us will have to face this in our own way. 2 fingers. We sometimes joked and teased each other when we were alone. But this was something completely different. I didn't like this whole game, but after they called me more than once, little man, I was ready to prove my worth. I began, but my voice trembled. Liam doesn't have to prove anything to you, does he, Sam? Sarah suddenly intervened. Her hands lay on my shoulders, confidently and softly. I think, yeah. I tried to come to my senses, but the words got stuck in my throat. Do you see? He doesn't have to stoop to your level. There was unshakable confidence in Sarah's voice. She was right. I let Callum's childish teasing throw me off balance. The first time he reveals himself will be a special moment, and we won't let you ruin it. Yes, Sarah stepped forward, standing between me and Callum. She crossed her arms over her chest, showing calm and determination. And he is ready to show what he is capable of. Yes, I muttered, still not believing that all this was happening. Sarah looked at Callum and chuckled slightly. There was confidence in her gaze, as if she had been in control of the situation from the very beginning. At that moment, it became clear that we were no longer playing. The decisions we make now will have consequences for each of us. Stephen grabbed a pair, clearly inhaling them deeply before clenching them into a fist and putting them in his pocket. Well, never keep a girl waiting, like I always say. Wait, I tried to move forward and block the muscular blonde's approach, but Sarah placed her hand on my chest, stopping me. Stay here, Liam. I need your support for this. She looked at me and smiled quickly before going back to watching Stephen crouch down in front of her, a very similar look in her eyes as those to whom she experienced this. Stephen stepped closer, his gaze sweeping over Sarah's figure before he leaned towards her, his voice soft but with clear confidence. Impressive. His palms slid lightly over her hips, slowing with each movement as if he was trying to feel every detail. Sarah shuddered slightly, her breathing became a little deeper. She met his gaze, a mixture of anticipation and slight hesitation in her eyes. Should I be gentle? He asked, the corners of his lips twitching into a slight smile. No, she answered quietly, her voice sounding more confident than she expected. Tenderness is for lovers. Now everything is different. Her gaze slid to the side, lingering on Liam, who was standing nearby. Sarah extended her hand, her fingers barely touching his chest, and then began to move lower. Isn't that right, Liam? Sometimes the moment speaks for itself. Liam remained silent, although his eyes showed that he heard every word. Sarah smiled, as if pleased with his reaction. Stephen did not wait, continuing his actions with the same confidence. A tense silence reigned in the room, interrupted only by intermittent sighs and whispers. Sarah closed her eyes, her fingers clenching tighter, as if trying to grab onto something intangible. This is too much, she breathed, her voice sounding almost confused. Stephen grinned, his confidence unshakable. You like this feeling, don't you? He continued, leaving her no time to respond. Liam looked away, allowing the moment to unfold without his intervention. The room was filled with an atmosphere full of hidden energy, in which everyone was absorbed in their own thoughts and feelings. Minji, it's nothing. Is it true? Callum leaned back in his chair, grinning and watching what was happening. What do you say, Liam? It's just a little. Feel. I wasn't sure why I said those words, but I couldn't stop myself from speaking. I didn't see everything that happened, but it was obvious that Stephen was acting with more confidence than he should have. Sarah clung tightly to my hand, her breathing became increasingly erratic. It is, Callum chuckled. Let's make this more interesting. If Sarah can cope and not give in to pressure, we will recognize that you, Liam, are the most resilient of us. Even after Callum's announcement, Stephen didn't slow down. The situation became tense, and it seemed that the air in the room became denser. Sarah was clearly at her limit. But if one of us can get her to the edge, he'll get his prize, Callum continued, grinning. The conditions were absurd, and I understood it. Time passed too quickly, and no one even noticed how long the first stage lasted. But instead of objecting, I just nodded, accepting the challenge. I'm calling. That's enough, Stephen. Callum raised his hand, stopping further actions. Daniel, Lacey, which one of you is next? Brother and sister looked at each other and, without words, making a common decision, stepped forward. We'll do this together, Lacey said, biting her lip. Great, Callum shrugged. Let's see if Sarah can hold out long enough for me to claim my prize. The tension in the room grew, and each of us felt that the stakes were much higher than just a game. But this is impossible. How can this be? I said, unable to believe my eyes. Lacey looked innocent and harmless, but Daniel, on the contrary, radiated confidence and a certain steadfastness. There was a tension in the air that could be cut with a knife. Stephen stood nearby, a grin on his face, clearly pleased with himself. He raised his hand as if to demonstrate something, but Callum intervened, interrupting his gesture. Hey, buddy, the rules here are simple. The winner receives the main prize, he said with a hint of arrogance in his voice. His gaze slid around the room and lingered on me for a moment. Now get yourself in order. Stephen winced with displeasure, but complied. He quickly wiped the residue off his hands on my shirt. Something clicked inside me, a mixture of irritation and perhaps envy. But I couldn't let those emotions take over. I took a deep breath and took a step back, trying to focus. I needed to stay calm. It wasn't a competition, or maybe it was. This entire absurd moment turned into a silent confrontation of characters. Meanwhile, Daniel and Lacey continued to whisper something to Sarah, their voices blending into a barely audible hum. Sarah looked slightly confused, but not afraid. Lacey leaned closer to her, whispering something in her ear, and the corners of Sarah's lips twitched into a slight smile. "I know what you like," Daniel said calmly and confidently, his voice sounding soft but firm. The room was filled with a strange, almost hypnotic silence. I stood to the side, watching them, feeling the anxiety growing. Inside, I was seething with questions to which I could not find answers. But one thing was clear: I couldn't afford to lose control. Not now. "Do you still think his touch can compare to ours?" she asked Sarah, but her gaze was fixed on me. "Do you believe he can make you feel the same way?" Her words seemed to hang in the air, creating an invisible thread of tension between us. Sarah didn't answer, but she didn't look like the question was actually directed at her. There was a challenge in Lacey's eyes as she communicated with me, making sure I had everything I needed to understand and experience every facet of this game. I remained silent, but probably the expression on my face said more than any words. Lacey grinned, her fingers sliding lightly over Sarah's shoulder, pausing for a moment before continuing upward. "Don't you think, Liam, that this is a little excessive?" Her voice was full of playful mockery. "Maybe we should add a little more naturalness?" She fell silent, her smile remained soft, but her gaze remained tenacious, as if she was trying to read my every thought. Her fingers carefully grabbed the corner of the heart-shaped sticker and slowly began to peel it off. My heart began to beat faster in anticipation of a moment that I knew was important for all of us. It's hard for me to stay calm," Sarah breathed, her voice trembling with emotion. "Liam, can I lean on you? Otherwise, I won't be able to cope." Her head was tilted back slightly, and she looked at me out of the corner of her eye. There was something deep in her gaze, a mixture of uncertainty and expectation. Lacey, standing nearby, hesitated before continuing. She clearly expected me to step aside, giving her space and not interfering with what was happening. "Oh, they are so cute," Lacey exclaimed with delight in her voice. "Don't you think so, Daniel?" "Without a doubt," he agreed with a slight smile. Sarah sighed slightly, and her voice sounded more confident. "Watch as much as you like, but remember, it's my choice how far we go." Sarah stood in the center of the room, her eyes darting between me and the others. There was a noise of voices and laughter all around, but for me everything merged into one inaudible hum. She was confident, strong, the same Sarah I loved. But there was something wrong in this situation. "Liam," her voice was shaking, but she was smiling, as if trying to convince both herself and me that everything was okay. I clenched my fists, trying to understand what was happening. This whole evening was like a poorly written play, where the actors forgot their roles and the audience stopped following the plot. "Sarah, maybe it's time to leave," I asked, taking a step forward. Callum, tall and confident, blocked my path. His grin was too wide and his gaze too piercing. "Where are you going, Liam?" "The evening is just beginning." "We have other plans," I answered firmly, looking him straight in the eyes. For a moment, the tension between us hung in the air, like a storm cloud ready to burst with lightning. Sarah touched my shoulder, and I felt her fingers tremble. "Let's just leave," she said quietly. Callum stepped back, raising his hands in mock submission. "As you say, lovebirds." We left the house and found ourselves in silence. The air was fresh and cold, and for the first time that evening I could breathe freely. Sarah squeezed my hand, and I felt her shoulders slump, as if she had lifted a heavy load. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "What are you apologizing for?" I was surprised. "You are not to blame for anything." She nodded, but her gaze was clouded. I I don't know why we even went there. It was a mistake. We walked silently along the deserted street, and every step helped us move away from that strange and uncomfortable evening. Finally, Sarah stopped and turned to me. Liam, thanks for not leaving me there alone. I smiled and pulled her towards me. Always. At that moment, there was no one more important than the two of us. No Callum, no other people's glances, no strange situations in which we found ourselves. Just us, under the starry sky, away from noise and false smiles. We decided not to return home right away. Instead, we went to a small cafe that was open until late. In the warm light of the lamps and the smell of coffee, we talked about little things, laughed, and just were together. You know, said Sarah, clutching a mug of hot tea, sometimes it seems that the world around us wants to prove that real feelings are weak. And we will prove the opposite, I answered, looking into her eyes. She smiled, and at that moment I realized, despite all the trials we had to go through, we made it. Together. The evening in the cafe lasted for several hours. We drank coffee, chatted about trifles, and laughed, as if we were trying to erase those unpleasant memories that hung like a shadow over us. But something inside me still haunted me. Sarah, I finally decided to ask, why did we even go to that party? I knew that nothing good would happen there. Sarah looked down, as if searching for an answer in the dark depths of her mug. You know, Liam, sometimes I feel like I have to prove something to someone. That I should be strong, confident, and brave. Maybe it was just an attempt to show myself. And you, that I can handle any situation. But you don't need to prove anything to anyone, I said, taking her hand, and certainly not in front of people like Callum. She nodded, gratitude showing in her eyes. You are right, but I think we both learned something today. We finished our coffee and, having paid, went outside. The city was asleep, and only the lanterns cast a warm light on the empty sidewalks. Do you want to go somewhere? I asked, looking at her. Let's come to you, Sarah answered, smiling. I think we need to be away from all this chaos. We were sitting on the sofa in my apartment. The windows were slightly open, and a light night breeze moved the curtains. Sarah settled down next to me, resting her head on my shoulder. You know, Liam, she whispered, sometimes I think about the future, about what awaits us next. And what do you see? She closed her eyes and was silent for a while. I see us, in a small apartment like this, or maybe in a house somewhere outside the city. You are cooking something in the kitchen, and I look out the window and see the sun setting. I smiled, just like in the movie. Why not? She raised her head and looked at me. We deserve a little peace, don't we? Of course they deserve it, I answered. This night became something of a starting point for us, the very line we drew to leave the past behind. Several days passed. Sarah and I tried not to talk about that party again, but the past always finds a way to remind us of itself. One evening I received a message. You think it's that simple, Liam? What can you just walk away and forget? Callum. I felt a chill run down my spine. The evening light of the lamp suddenly seemed too dim, and the silence in the apartment seemed too loud. Sarah noticed my expression. What's happened? She asked. This is Callum. I showed her the message. Her face turned pale, but she quickly pulled herself together. What does he want? Don't know, but I don't like it. We both understood. This is not the end. The next day, I met Callum in an old abandoned park on the outskirts of town. Sarah wanted to come with me, but I insisted that she stay at home. Callum stood by the old swing, arms crossed and grinning as if it was all a game, and he already knew who would win. Liam, why are you always so serious? He said as soon as I approached. What do you want, Callum? I asked, trying to remain calm. He took his phone out of his pocket and showed me the screen. On it was a photograph of Sarah taken that night. You don't want everyone to see this, do you? I clenched my fists, trying not to lose my temper. What are you trying to achieve? Just an admission that you are not such a hero, and that sometimes you need to give in to those who are stronger. I took a step forward, looking him straight in the eye. You won't get what you want, Callum. Neither from me nor from Sarah. He chuckled and put the phone back in his pocket. We'll see. Callum turned and walked away, leaving me alone among the rusty swings and decaying trees. When I got home, I told Sarah about the meeting. She listened attentively without interrupting. What are we going to do? She asked. We will continue to live, I answered. Let Callum think he has power over us. But that's not true. Sarah nodded and smiled. We can handle it. Together. That night we fell asleep holding each other's hands, and although somewhere in the depths of my consciousness there was still anxiety, I knew. As long as we were together, no Callum could break us. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.